afternoon, everyone. I appreciate you being here today. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would love for Councilwoman Dewar to lead us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor Breckus.
Here.
Dewar.
Here.
Delgado. McKenzie. Jordan. Bobzien. Cheevy.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you do have a quorum on the Reno City Council.
All right, thank you very much. I'll send it back to you for item A3, public comment.
Madam Mayor, we have general public comment today from Tom Dunn, followed by Sam Dene.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, for the record, Tom Dunn, representing the men and women of the Reno Firefighters Association. Unfortunately, I couldn't be at the last council meeting due to some other conflicts, but I wanted to make some comments on some of the presentation that was made at the last meeting. I think it's important to understand that for fire stations are located in our communities. They're placed and staffed based on, as a recognition of the values that are at risk in our communities and our neighborhoods, and that they are not staffed based on call volume. During the Great Recession, as stations and apparatus were closed due to budget constraints, call volume in other stations in some cases doubled or tripled to take on the existing demand for services. And that demand has not increased, that demand did not decrease during the Great Recession and has only increased since then. Previous development that's been planned that was put on hold due to the Great Recession, as well as continuing developments that are coming on the books, are going to increase the demand for services on this community. And I think it's important to recognize that, you have fire stations right now that are running a large amount of calls, and there's no additional staffing based on that increase. And that's just a fact of life that we're dealing with currently. But I want to make sure that we're not getting into the trap of selling some of our neighborhoods or our communities short and moving demand for services to other areas just based on call volume alone. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you so much.
Sam Dene.
Sam DNA Dene. That's me, the heart and soul and the body and mind of Reno government. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I've spent more time at these government podiums than nothing. I'm not complaining about it, but more time at these government podiums than all of you citizens added together and your mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. Anybody want to challenge that, come up here. I've been coming to these government meetings since 1994, much to their chagrin, but I'm pointing out the problems that Reno has. I don't come up here kissing their butterfucos. I come up here telling them, because nobody else will come up and complain. I'm up here telling the truth about what's going on in the mayor. She knows it very well. I like it when there's a big crowd at the Sam DNA show. It inspires me to come up here and talk. Yes, I'm responsible for 92% of the good things about Reno. Nice smiley face, it's true. But the problem, the 92% of the bad things about Reno are perpetrated by the Reno media wacko freaks all over the place here. They never... Is this story right here worth listening to or seeing tomorrow in the news? No. The wacko freaks over there scared to death of this 160-pound senior citizen fighter bomber pilot, retired. There we go. That was the introduction, by the way. People are always asking me, what do you think of Mayor Hillary Sheevy? And my automatic answer is, she's no Sam DNA Dene, and she knows it, and everybody knows it. But I also say this, and I've been coming to these meetings more than all of you people added together. I do say this, of all the times I've been coming to these meetings, she's the best mayor. She's the best mayor. She didn't ask me to say this. She's the best mayor that Reno has ever had, and I can throw in county commission, and I can throw in Sparks. She's the best we've ever had. Anybody who wants to come in here and try out for mayor, they're not going to make it unless the voting system is rigged, because I know the pulse of the people. And she did not ask me to say this. I just have to say it because of my heart speaking. The citizens that I see all over the place, the nightclubs, the coffee shops, they say they really like the job she's doing. Maybe don't agree with all of her decisions, but they like the way she runs the operation. She runs it with dignity, spunk, gumption, moxie, and a lot of charisma. But you know why she's so good at this, ladies and gentlemen? Because she's got the greatest gunny sergeant government has ever known. And there's another wacko freak back there, media wacko freak. Nice cheering back there. The best gunny sergeant anybody ever had, right here. Month after month. I'm not always on her side, but she's getting used to being castigated. But there's nothing like my capability, Sam's capability of castigating the wacko freak, media wacko freaks. Now that we got racism and sex scandals all over the community, not her fault. The media wacko freaks, it's their fault, because they drove the previous city manager out of his job, and it was wrong, and we're finding out they were wrong, and they should apologize to Mr. Klinger and to the whole community.
Sam.
Thank you.
Sam.
Thank you over there. You're welcome.
Sam, be nice or else. Remember?
Chapter 2, 3, and 4. I'm learning them.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sit down.
Madam Mayor, with that, I have no further general public comment, as everyone signed in with me is here for a particular agenda item. So with that, I would suggest we move on to approval of the agenda.
All right, at this time, I'm going to ask council members, may I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
So I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Back at you, Madam
Madam
Clerk.
Mayor, our next item is B1, discussion and potential action regarding legal representation. And I
Alright.
do have public comment on this item.
All right, thank you very much.
Our first public comment is from Janice Flanagan, followed by Marlene Lockhart. And I would take this time to acknowledge if anyone has signed in online and is in the audience and has not come over to me, please do so I know you're present.
Hello, council people. I'm very happy to be here. Good afternoon. I would like to suggest that we hire outside counsel to handle the sexual harassment problem. In my opinion, the city attorney's office has bungled this from day one. And inexcusably, they have made an outrageous claim against Councilman Dewar for doing her job in the excellent manner in which she always does it. And I think that alone should disqualify them from doing any further work on this sexual harassment claim. The city of Reno has to incur extra expense now because this was not handled correctly in the beginning. I do hope you will see your way clear to hire outside counsel to handle this from here on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Marlene Lockhart, followed by Lynette Evans.
Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Marlene Lockhart, and I'm here representing the Nevada Women's Lobby. First, we would like to commend Mayor Sheevy for bringing this item forward and placing it on the agenda for public comment and to have a discussion surrounding the events that have taken place since last August. I have submitted a letter to you, each one of you, from the Nevada Women's Lobby. I won't read that letter verbatim to you now, but suffice it to say that we have been concerned and with growing alarm have read the events that were taking place in the city of Reno, government atmosphere since last July. And we have had growing dismay as now we have watched legal strategy and tactics being used that are from the 1950s. And as the women in this state, we feel this is the wrong approach to settle a legal conflict. It is women shaming, and we feel that it has a chilling effect on the employees of the city of Reno for bringing forward any additional complaints or concern about the working atmosphere. And so we strongly urge you to take some sort of action to create and foster a better environment for women in this community, and for you to address our concerns about the legal strategy utilized. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I don't see your letter up here. Madam Clerk, do you have it?
Madam Mayor, this letter has not been submitted to me, so if I can have a copy of it, I can ensure that it is entered into the record.
Okay,
I
great.
emailed it
Oh,
to
perfect,
everyone.
Perfect. I just want to make sure it's on the record. Great, thank you very much.
Lynette Evans, followed by Milan Hawkins.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynette Evans. I'm here to represent myself and also to represent working women who aren't able to be here because they're at work. I don't know a lot about this case other than the little bit I've read in the newspaper, but I can tell you this. The way that the plaintiffs in this case have been handled is shameful. I'm incredibly proud of our community and our city, but I'm ashamed of how the city attorney has handled this case, and the notion that a woman should be asked for a history of her affairs, her intimate affairs, in this day and age is unconscionable. I urge the city council to remove the city attorney and hire someone who will handle this more equitably.
As a reminder of decorum in chambers, please hold your applause. Milan Hawkins, followed by Jay Colbell-Clauso.
Hello, my name is Mylan Hawkins, but that's okay. And I also come here representing working women. I have the ability to be retired now, but many of the women I have worked with have faced workplace harassment and sexual harassment. And I am appalled by what the city attorney has done in requesting the unseemly, as the Reno Gazette Journal put it. This request is not only aberrant, but violates federal law and violates basic morality. And it puts all of you on the council of a request for intimate sexual details of a person who was in your employ as voyeurs. And that is a very unattractive position to be put in. So I would echo the words that have been spoken before, that the current city attorney be removed from the case, new counsel gotten, and I would leave the city attorney to the tender mercies of the voters of Reno this November. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Jay Colbell-Carlson, followed by Jared Moser.
Hello, it's Jay Colbert-Classel. This is the first time that I've been before you since I was threatened by the city attorney in a public meeting. I was chairing the Ward 3 NAB, and he sent his staff to threaten me with lawsuits against open meeting violation after I challenged the park benches that were removed from the old bus station. It was not a battle I was willing to fall on or to try to hire counsel. I brought a cheesecake to the next NAB meeting to say goodbye to the people that I respected, and I have moved on and directed my volunteering efforts not directly through the city, but for the city. I still spend about 25 hours a week volunteering, following agenda items, but not as a participant of the city because of those threats. And at this stage, I hear just so much deeper of a level of attack from people who could not escape like I could. And I felt it was time to come back and tell that story from 2016 on why I've taken the step back that I've taken. And I'm tired today. Like, I would have much rather just not been here and let you work on the budget, which is you know what's happening. It's so hard to keep people inside. We have families that are still on 2 to 6 month waiting lists to get their children inside who are sleeping in Motel 6s, and that's what I should be doing right now. But this is a line in the sand that we have to draw. You need somebody else for this case to move forward, and you need to tell this city from the top down that our culture has to absolutely change, that we have to use open meeting law to be transparent and not use open meeting law to shut down engagement, not use sexual harassment policy to keep people from keeping themselves safe. And yeah, that was longer than I thought I was going to go, so farewell.
All right, thank you, sir.
Jared Moser, followed by Tom Dunn.
Madam Chair and members of the council, my name is Jared Moser. I'm a senior in the social work program at the University of Nevada. I do not believe it is ethical or relevant to investigate the sexual history of a victim of sexual assault. If this practice were to occur, the original reason for filing this lawsuit will become minimized and would perpetuate shaming a female victim of sexual harassment. This is not equitable, nor does it validate the victim's experience. Please do not go through with this tactic. Please do not downplay the severity of this issue, and please consider an alternate attorney. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tom Dunn, followed by Jan Brown.
Good afternoon. For the record, Tom Dunn, representing the men and women of the Reno Firefighters Association. Last Wednesday, I was president at City Council when there was discussion on a line, 866 Reno Tips, for employees, and a voice that employees could anonymously file a complaint for, along the lines of waste, fraud, and abuse. This organization has been through a lot in the last 10 years with the Great Recession, with current legal proceedings that are currently going on, and with the budget and stuff moving forward. And I sat here in this audience thinking, what a great step forward for this organization, for the employees of the city of Reno. That message has been completely diluted by the reporting in the RGJ the next day that vilified a city councilwoman currently standing, here in this chamber, as well as the demeanor of employees of the city of Reno. I think it has a negative effect on your current employees. I think it has a negative effect on the taxpayers, and I think it has a negative effect on potentially future employees of what the culture of this city and what the culture of this department, or of your departments are going to be. Who's going to come forward now at this point if there's going to be a fear of retaliation or retribution from any city department based on what's currently going on? Who's going to stand up and be a voice for your employees? And more importantly, who's going to stand up and be an advocate for your employees? Thank you.
Jan
Thank
Brown,
you.
followed by Danae Atchison.
Hello, City Council. I'm a 17-year resident homeowner of Reno. I've been retired for 20 years. I worked for a Fortune 500 company before that for 30 years, the last 10 years of which I spent in training employees about sexual harassment issues because my company's deep pockets did not look as enchanting going to court and losing heavily financial awards. I was frankly, until the recent Me Too effort, thought the U.S. military was the only organization that wasn't up to date on how you deal with sexual harassment. I also investigated sexual harassment complaints until I began to read in the paper that the City Council seemed to have a similar problem. Now, this is not rocket science, you all. It requires a dedicated executive who insists on fair treatment. It requires an independent complaint source, which you have recently installed. I applaud you for that, but it certainly does not involve what Marlene referred to as 1950s era investigation. Those things went out years ago in the public courts. So I would encourage you to continue beginning to deal with this in a way that treats all people fairly, not only the accuser, but the accused. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Danae Atchison, followed by Sam Danae.
My name is Danae Atchison, and I am asking that the council bring in outside counsel to work this case. I feel like the lack of transparency is giving the perception that there is a lot of corruption in our government. Furthermore, I would also like to ask that the council strongly consider settling this case. These women have given their life to the city and they have lost everything. Currently, the process and the victim shaming is frankly embarrassing. Our city has shown a pattern of knowingly hiring these predators and not protecting their employees. I also would like to note that although I am here to support Deanna and Maureen, more importantly, I am here to set an example for our daughters, our granddaughters, and my two sons. I want to make sure that they never have any question on what is appropriate as far as treating others, and knowing that our government, our people, our family, our community will be there to back them in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sam Dene, followed by Ashley Graham.
Sam Dene, and I'm glad I'm going last. Virtually every person who came to the podium based their knowledge on the media wacko freaks. I'm here every day. I see what goes on, and I see the lies that they tell you. I'll give you an example. Back when our police chief was a temporary police chief, I nominated him to be a permanent police chief, and the media wacko freaks did everything they could to castigate that fine man, and I had to come to these podiums and at least convince them to hire that good man. The media did the same thing to the chief of police that they're trying, and I'm not here to speak in favor of the city attorney or against him, but they did almost the same thing to him, except they didn't bring sex into it or racism. They just said he wasn't qualified, didn't have the background. He was a good man. I hardly knew him, but I could tell that people really liked him, except the media didn't like him. The media does not like law enforcement. It's built into their raw DNA, not like my DNA, which is real DNA. At any rate, what we have here is everything being driven by the wacko freak, taxpayer-funded media. And they are taxpayer-funded. They've got a role. They're being told what to do. They're trying to destroy that man, and he's already recused himself from being the city attorney. He's not even going to be handling it, and most of these people don't even seem to know that. Why do we hire a new attorney out there? Maybe we should get an outsider. I don't know. He's got 20 people in his staff. Somebody in that staff should be able to handle this themselves. Sex and racism. I come to these meetings every week. We talk about the budget. We talk about whether or not they deserve to be up at that podium, at that dais instead of me. Talk about a lot of things. Sex brought all of you people down here. And I'm not against women, and I'm not against men. I think they're all great people. But you bring the sex in and thing, and you're giving it a rotten playing field because it's women that need to be defended. How about poor Mr. Klinger? Nobody came down here to defend Mr. Klinger, the previous city manager, who the media wacko freaks drove out, insulted him, insulted his family, the horrible things they did to that man that I saw, and I don't even know him except I watched him for 5 years do a good job of being a city manager, and instead the media drove him out. He didn't have to go, but they insult him, and he said like that man a little while ago, talking about being on the NAB, and said, I had enough, so he said he left. And it's just a disgusting thing that's going on, and you can blame it every bit of it on the media. Not the television guys over there. They're just running their cameras. I'm talking to the people back there with the pens and pencils, and Channel 2, Channel 4, that wacko freak over there. All of them just reading their teleprompters, doing what they're being told to do by apparently rotten, evil people. Does anybody understand what I just said? Look at that, Mr. Campbell back there. Hi, Mr. Campbell. Glad to see you back here. They drove that poor man out of here, too. This is a disaster, and can I have about 5 more minutes? I knew it.
Thanks, Sam.
Ashley Graham, followed by Chip Evans.
Hello. So I'll keep this very short and sweet. Just wanted to start off saying that specifically to Ms. Dewar, you always have my vote, and I think that this was swayed, and I adore you, and thank you so much for everything that you do for this community. So I'm definitely for having new council, and I'm very disappointed as somebody who has been born and raised in this city that we are even at this point. I believe in all of you. I know your hearts. I know you individually. And I think that you'll do the right thing here and make sure that we represent women in a respectful way. And I'm also raising 4 daughters in this community. And I couldn't even imagine them having to go through this. So I appreciate in advance you making sure that we have counsel that represents women and any employee who comes forward with an issue, and have separate legal counsel. Thank you.
Chip Evans?
Thank you.
Chip Evans, good afternoon, council, staff. I want to point out just a couple things from my own past. I've spent time as a human resources executive in Silicon Valley during very competitive times, and I've also run companies. And you may think this is an important meeting today, and the truth is it's probably more important than you realize. The reason for that is that we have an environment where we all have relationships. We know each other, we know staff, we know people that work for us, we know each other. And it's hard to separate that out sometimes, but today is you have to kind of rise up and challenge yourself to what's best for the city of Reno for the next 10 years. And the reason that's important is that we've got a reputation now. The reputation is certainly creeping up that this isn't a good place for women to be city councilwomen or to women to be employees in the city. And we're about to turn off our best talent pool, perhaps for years. In Silicon Valley, they started glass ceilings to note bad places to work. And the city of Reno can ill afford to be that. We need the best and the brightest. We've got big challenges here. One of the challenges that you face today is both the perception and the reality. And I want you to go vote in favor of restoring perception. If that means a screen reset to help rebuild the perception that this is a good place to work, then I suggest that's what you do. We don't want a reputation as a hostile work environment. I can tell you from my human resources experience, this investigation, the process that has gone on from the first time there was a hint of a problem, has been screwed up in lots of different phases, and you're not going to fix that today. You're not going to fix that today. All you have to do is to fix the very next steps that you take. So please be free of preconceived notions. Think about the city 10 years from now, since all of you are temporary employees, as it turns out. What are you going to do to attract other people to council and the staff? And so I encourage you to find a screen reset button. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we received online public comment forms from Melanie Davis, Cynthia Richardson, Joe Etchemendy, and Carrie Sue Starnes, who are in support of obtaining outside counsel. Additionally, we received written correspondence from Elisa Caffaretta and Barbara Tritchell in support of outside counsel, and that has been distributed to council. With that, I have no further public comment today.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone that would like to speak at this time? No other further public comments? I just want to make sure no one else would like to get up and speak. No? Okay. First of all, I appreciate everyone coming today, and this has been a very frustrating process, and I guess whenever it becomes very challenging and very difficult whenever you have elected officials and you have appointed officials and things of that nature. But for me, whenever I read about this type of questioning in the newspaper, I was incredibly shocked. I was disgusted. Frankly, also being a woman, I would be so offended. It was something that I was embarrassed by, and it wasn't even happening to me. It was happening to 2 women that I worked with who had put blood, sweat, and tears into this city. And I know how much they cared for this city. And it was something where I felt so disappointed, first of all, in the process. And at that point, I will tell you this council unfortunately has not been in a lot of the decisions. And when in the city attorney's office, that is an elected position. So it becomes, I think it becomes challenging. And so for us, a lot of us have not been aware of the process. And clearly, that's whenever I think it's important more now than ever to stand up and say, this is wrong, and we will not tolerate it. And so that's what I wanted to do today, because I am not comfortable with the direction this has gone in any shape or form. And we have tried hard to restore the integrity and the faith back into our organization. There's a lot of, let me tell you the best part about my job, and this is no joke, it's the people that work here and who have worked here in the past. They give 150%. And whenever I think about that and I look at this process, it makes me feel that we've failed. And that is really, really important, that you understand that moving forward, we bring something that's fair and safe and an environment that our employees and our staff embrace, because there are so many wonderful people here. And so, and I think you're exactly right, bringing in, you know, this new process. The next day, it completely got wiped away. And what does that say? Our employees need to feel comfortable and safe here. And especially whenever I read something like that in the media, it's not okay, it's not acceptable, period. Especially coming from a woman, and predominantly a city that is ran by women. And I have said this, and my council knows this, I said we have got to stand up and say something. And I won't tolerate it, the city won't tolerate it, and I want to send that message. I'm going to allow for this council to speak, because a lot of this process we have not been involved in. We've actually found out through the media, and that has been very disheartening, very disheartening. And with that being said, I want you guys to all have the opportunity to speak. And one of the things is we have open meeting law, so we can't go around and speak to each other. And so that's why we're doing this in this process. But after everyone gets the opportunity to say something, I'm going to ask, and I'll even make the motion to ask Mr. Hall if he will remove himself from this ongoing lawsuit, because it's the right thing to do. I'm not comfortable with it, and I'm sure many of you sitting up here are not either. I don't know, but at this time I'm going to ask for your comments and questions for the city attorney. I'm going to hand it over to Councilwoman Breckus. I'm going to start with you.
Well, thank you for calling me on me, Madam Mayor. I appreciate it. I don't have a whole lot to say. I think I have spoken on the issue that most of the people brought forward today, of the interrogatory and the questioning of one of the plaintiffs, and I think that quote was in the paper, and I did not find it appropriate. I don't think it's a good legal tactic. You know, I think we all have our versions of what happened, how we got to here today. And I'm not going to go off onto that. You know, everything from the Wall report is in there to, you know, how we voted on the settlement agreement with Mr. Klinger. You know, there's a big record on this that, you know, we can all stand and explain where we've been. And then there is, like you said, a lot in the closed session. So I'm optimistic under the leadership of our new manager that we're moving in a far better chapter. I guess the important thing to me today is to really want to focus on what you've proposed, and how I would understand, and I'll ask for, I guess, your confirmation on that, is our charter requires us, if we're going to hire outside attorney, to vote 6/7. So
we would need
it would come back for another agenda item. We'd have to vote 6/7, and for me, we'll have to be identifying, you know, where the funds come from. And I've learned in past outside councils is we need a solid project manager, because we're going to be not relying on the city attorney's office to manage the project. So, you know, that seems to be the decision in front of us today. And then, you know, the progression of this case is just a whole nother chapter also that we're, we're still involved and will still a story be told. So thank you everyone for coming today. And I appreciate your input on this issue of importance. And I've been associated with the city since 1998 as an employee. And this is an important chapter, but I think that we've had a good work environment in many ways, and I am hoping that that will be restored under the new leadership that we have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilman Bobzian.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you again for putting this agenda item on today's budget meeting. Certainly, this was something that we had to deal with quickly. I think you and I both were in the same position last week when we read about this in the paper. That was the first that we had heard about it, and I think you and I had touched base and both kind of were generally mortified as to the tactic. I think to further kind of look at this, and we all understand this. I mean, this is the challenge is that we learned Wednesday at our first budget meeting that we are facing a $5 million deficit that we need to work through. That is hanging over us as we deal with this particular piece of litigation and a host of other ones that our city attorney is trying to guide the city through. This does come down to this very interesting situation and tension that we have in that we have an elected city attorney. And certainly last legislative session, Senator Julia Ratty brought forth a bill to make that an appointed position. I believe this council chose to stay silent on the matter at that time, but it'll be interesting to see if she brings that forward to the next legislative session and whether or not that'll be received again by the legislature and what the next governor may think about this very issue. It's a small issue, but it's a challenge, and I think if nothing else, a whole bunch of people woke up in the last couple days that we have the situation, and people are now asking questions about the model itself. And the challenge for the city attorney, I believe, is putting forth a vigorous defense of the city and its taxpayers, while at the same time doing it in a way that is befitting of our values as a community. And that is a heavy, heavy burden. And I, for one, given the amount of people that came out today to share some time with us on a Friday afternoon and make their voices known, and certainly all the folks that sent us emails, the people that have talked to me have stopped me in the grocery store like they've stopped everyone else. They have spoken, and it'll be good to hear from our city attorney, his response to this. Hopefully this is a teaching moment. I kind of hate that phrase, but there's got to be some introspection that comes out of this, and there's got to be some way to move forward in a manner that is more befitting, again, of the values of our community.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Delgado.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to everybody that's here to share your concerns. I, like you and my fellow council members, have had the rude awakening from hearing about the direction the city was taking through media, unfortunately, because we weren't as appraised to the strategies from what our city council members were taking, or the city attorney was taking. So a lot to take in within a short amount of time, but also knowing that, again, appreciated you and for putting this on the item, and appreciating your initiatives along with the council members in supporting that other city employees feel respected in terms of how they can reach out if there are issues here at our city. So thank you for those. This is very difficult because I'm not an attorney. I don't want to even pretend that I am an attorney. I don't know the legalities in terms of the framework from what we can say without putting our city in further liability, and what I should not say, and et cetera, et cetera. But I know that the tactics that our city attorney, maybe under his watch, that were given or not given, were not acceptable by any means. I know that as an elected, that we were held to a higher standard, and I know that from speaking to many of my attorney friends, they had said that that's kind of what you do in the private sector, right? But then when you're on our side in the watchful eye of the public, and another thing is you can't necessarily take that road. You've always got to take the higher road in terms of how you are fighting zealously for the city, for its liabilities, and for its taxpayers. And to what Councilman Wozniak stated, it's tough job to do. But I am very much looking forward to hearing what our city attorney has to say in terms of what that strategy was, or what tactics were used to the extent that they can without jeopardizing this case or other cases, or how that dialogue is taken here at the dais, because we've always taken in my eyes, the past of saying you can't necessarily talk about much of anything when dealing with legal matters because the liabilities. But to your point earlier, Madam Mayor, I'm fully willing and to take forward the vote of saying, is this appropriate? Do we go and say, do we look at other options? I think we owe to the voters, we owe to the people that came out today that we have that tough conversation. That's why we got voted. Make some of these tough decisions to ultimately build the trust and the morale for our community, so they can feel as they can come to us. And of course, that comes with money. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to make sure we have the trust and the morale of the community, that they come to us, knowing that we'll serve them to the best that we can.
And, to your point, I know when you bring up money, I think people forget our employees are the biggest asset that we have in the city. And it's important that we invest in them. So, I know that people get, they see headlines with big dollar amounts and things like that, but it is really important that our employees know that they're valued, and that we do spend money to make sure that we can protect them and do what's right. And back to your point, Councilman Delgado, I'm really grateful you guys are here. It's hard to speak up. Completely, it really is. It's hard to speak up. It's not easy. So I appreciate you being here. And this isn't easy. This is very uncomfortable. Obviously, this is the public process, right? And it can be very uncomfortable. And so I'm grateful for all of you for speaking up. And certainly now in these times, more than ever, especially as women, I'm grateful, and we all need to listen to that intuition and speak up more, because we forget that we have that gift of that intuition. And again, as women, and I know some of you one day will speak out when you're ready to. Not all of us can come to terms at the same time when we want to do that and we're comfortable with it, but especially to the women in the room, thank God for you. God for you. Vice Mayor Jordan.
Thank you very much. A lot of the things that I was going to comment or question have already been stated. I did want to comment, though, Chip Evans, who's in the back of the room, he comes at it with a very similar perspective as I do. 20 years in human resources, the best thing that you can have is have your employees say you're the best place to work. It's not your bottom line. It's not, how many widgets you might make or those sorts of things. It's how much trust your employees have in you and how much they trust you in the decisions that you make. My 20 years of human resource experience came, interestingly enough, at a law firm. So I also understand the litigation side and how ugly that can be, and how some of those in the legal practice, particularly in this realm, can practice in a way that is questionable and maybe play some things out in the media, which isn't the best way to practice law either. But as we sit here today, I would agree that this issue is bigger than us. It is bigger than this moment. It is bigger than this case. It's about the trust of our employees in our organization and the trust of our community in us. And at this point, it's about leadership. And I'm looking very, very intently to what our leadership in our legal department is going to say, because that is going to determine a lot today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in a pretty difficult position here today because somehow I had gotten a bit wrapped up in this entire proceeding. And I just want to first thank everyone who's come out. Whether you spoke or not, you clearly care about what's happening at the city. And I think that since we've been here, we've tried to be a role model, to bring a new culture to our city, to set a new path to pick a star to shoot for. I know when I came in, I wanted this to be the very best place to work, a place that I could be extremely proud of every day when I met with the residents and talked to them about what was happening at the city of Reno, the projects that we're taking on, the excitement happening here, the new Reno, the reinvention of Reno. So because I become close to this, I thought my best approach today would be to take a step back, actually, and try to look at this from a 30,000-foot level rather than a microscopic level. And in doing that, I really asked myself, what is really happening here? What is this case about? What are we doing here? How did we get here? And recently, our attorneys applauded me for directing an employee to HR. And I really appreciated their acknowledgement of our process, a procedure that I have been knowledgeable of for 30 years at every government agency I've worked at. It basically comes down to what we tell our kids these days, which is see something, say something. Don't let it fester. You never know, and it's important to speak out. So from that, and before I go on with my comments, I actually want to thank the 3 women who, in retrospect, took a great risk in apprising us of issues that they found at the City Hall, whether it be whistleblowing, hostile work environment, which has to do with bullying at the end of the day, or even sexual harassment, which came in later. And those are Maureen McKissick, Deanna Gescheider, and Brianna Wolf. I think we owe them a great debt of gratitude for revealing to us the makeup of our city, the fact that we did not have good procedures in place. Who knew? If I had known, I doubt I would send one of them to HR. You know, if I'd known we had a problem, I assumed it was good. I assumed it was safe. But because you came forward, we learned important things about our agency. They're difficult to learn about, difficult to remediate. It's just not as simple as having one person leave an agency. And somehow the other 1,400 are perfectly great and everything is wonderful. And then in terms of pulling back, and I hope you'll indulge me for one moment, but I've been trying to look nationally and think about how does this resonate nationally? And the first thing that came to my mind, because it just happened, was the Parkland shooting. No one got killed here. People did not lose their lives, they did lose their jobs. In that case, people did lose their lives, but the threat was neutralized. The students were invited back to school. And a number of them said, I'm not coming back. I don't feel safe. I don't feel that the environment in which I'm trying to learn is good for me. I'm still fearful. While people are telling me that this was the problem, I'm not sure if this was the problem. And be it mental health, be it guns, be whatever the issue is, be it bad upbringing, they did not feel safe and they've been speaking out and they want systemic change to keep them safe. And that in my heart is what I have read into this. We did do investigations. We tried to find out what the problems were. The people that brought the case forward were not interviewed, so we really don't know their story. And here we are, and the reason I'm going here is that I appreciate the fearsomeness with which our attorneys are working to save the city, but I also believe it is misplaced. I believe that at the end of the day, in order to even bring a suit, you have to get this kind of suit, you have to get permission, a reading from the EEOC. They have to say you have a legitimate claim to even allow you to sue. You can sue without that, but they do their own evaluation. They evaluated it, and they said, this has merit, it needs to proceed. Doesn't mean they're right. I certainly have no opinion about that right now until the issues, we really find out what happened. But my concern is that the litigation process is not a place for solving problems like this. You know, it doesn't work very well. It ends up about being winning and losing money and those kind of things, and that doesn't help us at the city. So I do think that the attorney's approach has affected the outcome. We have not had mediation. We have not even sat down with these employees, and so I feel like we have lost our way in this process. So we're not in the business of victim shaming. That's not what I signed up for. That I don't want to be part of that. So I think it's about whether the case was investigated fairly,
thoroughly, and how we remediate, how we move forward, how we make systemic change at the city. And so to that end, this approach, the legal strategy, has bothered me because I think at the end of the day, we're not here to win and lose against our employees. I think at the end of the day, we're here trying to find out what so motivated them to come forward. What are the issues that we need to address? As a person working for 35 years, sometimes I have found that I'm the problem. And I've had to step away. I've had other staff step in for me. I have had other agencies step in for me if it wasn't going well. And I guess that would be, Madam Mayor, my thought on this is I don't want to be having a 6/7 vote. I don't want to be us against the attorney's office, the council against attorney. I think sometimes it takes a very big person to recognize when it's just not working with them, that they've made a misstep or their office has made a misstep, and that we need to go in a new direction. And so I would hope at the end of this that we could call on, Mr. Hall to consider recusing his office on his own. I think that would be a better outcome than the council doing it. I don't want to be pitted against. I want to be working with our council. I admire them. I have worked with them on many other cases. They have done a good job. They have resolved many things in the city. It's not working right now. It's not working well. And those are my thoughts, and I appreciate the time to speak to them, just to kind of pull back and say, what are we? What are we trying to fix? How do we get there? So thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Dewar. Councilmember McKenzie.
I don't know if I thank you or not. This is a tough discussion, and when I heard about the line of questioning that was being directed, I had two thoughts, and the first one was that isn't a question that I would ask. I think that's completely out of line. And the second one is, where did the news media get that information? And the second question is that the attorney that's defending that's representing these ladies is trying to sensationalize this case in the press.
Oh, no.
And utilize the press to try to attack the city and influence changes, just like we're talking about here today. And I've been involved in a number of lawsuits similar to this through my career as a labor leader. I've dealt with a lot of legal counsel, and I've dealt with a lot of pleadings. And whenever you get into a case like this, there's some very personal questions involved. When I have an attorney working for me individually, I can review those pleadings and I can cipher through those pleadings and say, hey, I don't think that this is appropriate. You shouldn't be asking this question. We can't do that here. We can't ask him to bring each pleading to this body for us to review and make a vote on whether or not we think that's an appropriate pleading. And as you've heard, as we've gone around the dais, the question that was asked, none of us truly felt was appropriate. But guess what? There is never a suit like this, and this isn't 1950s mentality. You can go find another similar case to this that's pending in front of court today in any jurisdiction, and you'll find questions like this in that pleading, asking these questions. It's not this isn't a new question that's asked when it comes to this type of case. And that's based more likely specifically on some of the allegations and some of the other stuff that was found in the investigation. But if something is similarly situated, there's a good chance similar questions are going to be asked. Do I agree with that? No, I don't. I believe it's victim shaming. I don't think it's appropriate. And I've made that point very clear to the city attorney's office, and they've taken note of that. But we do not have the opportunity to look at those pleadings and make that decision. And that doesn't change if we hire a private counsel to take the city attorney office's place. And if we hire a private attorney to represent us moving forward on this case, and we ask them to stringently defend the taxpayers of this community, then they're going to ask the same type of questions, and we're still not going to have the opportunity to filter through their pleadings and ask them to take out questions we don't agree with. And the attorney that we're dealing with in this case is going to take those same questions to the same reporter, to RGJ, and we're going to have the same glaring headlines that the city is attacking the integrity of these women. The city is not attacking the integrity of these women. The city attorney's office is trying to defend the city and the taxpayers of this city. This is litigation. This isn't a person that's come forward and filed a complaint and we're in the middle of investigating the complaint and they're making the same questions during that investigation. If that was the case, I would not only be calling for a private counsel to come in and take his place doing this, I'd have a private counsel investigating his procedures in doing that type of investigation. We're talking about two different things, and I'd hope that the women that are employed for the city of Reno have faith that if they make a report with the procedures that we've set forward under the new city manager, that they will be protected. And guess what? The press did not get the name of any person that has filed a complaint against the city of Reno, did not get those names from the city of Reno. They have either gone to the press themselves or they've hired an attorney and that attorney has taken their names to the press. This has not been, we have not disclosed as a city, disclosed anybody's confidential information. We have not called anybody out in the public and tried to shame them in the public. So, while I'm frustrated with a line of questioning that I don't agree with, I also know the limitations of this council when it comes to dealing with the city attorney's office. He's elected. It would be no different if he was elected or appointed. We can't control his pleadings unless we do it in an open meeting just like this.
That's what we're doing.
And if you want to bring every pleading in front of this council for every case that the city attorney's office handles, we better all quit our day jobs because we're going to be here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because that office does a lot of work and they handle a lot of different cases. And this is the only case that's on the front page of the paper. And I sympathize with the women that were involved in this. I don't believe that the initial investigation was presented to the council appropriately. I think the biggest problem was we had problems within our procedures, that we didn't know how to deal with a case that dealt with the city manager or somebody above the city manager's position, because none of our policies addressed that. We worked on that, and it's something we can't roll back the clock and start over with. It's happened. As we work forward, I know that we don't ever want to see something like that happen again, and you know, but the idea that hiring a private counsel is going to change the circumstances is not true, because we can't do any different with a private counsel than what we can do with the city attorney's office, as far as making sure that they don't ask questions that we don't want them to. If we don't want those questions asked, then we need to lay those questions out today and tell the city attorney, these are the questions we don't want asked, and I'm sure that he'll follow that direction. But you're going to have to do the same thing with a private attorney. So I don't see spending $750,000 to $1 million to hire a private counsel to defend this case, which is probably what we're looking at for a private attorney. We're probably looking at $500,000 just to get them up to speed where the city attorney's office is right now currently on the case. I don't see where we're going to find that funding. And it's really hard to say that we would have to be trading some pretty valuable things in this city to do that. I believe the city attorney's office has a level of professionalism to handle this if they understand what our concerns are going forward. That, I don't think that any of us sat down and voiced our concerns to them before it became front page news.
That is not true, Councilmember McKenzie.
Well, maybe you did, but I didn't.
Okay, well, when you mentioned all of us, so I just want to clarify. Sorry, it's a very sensitive subject. Okay, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, but that's just me, so. Any other comments from council? Seeing that there are none. Go right ahead, Councilman
No,
Bobbsey.
I just, again, I think it's appropriate that we hear from Mr. Hall. And I think the other thing that concerned me, and while we're in this open venue to talk about what some of the tensions have been between the mayor and the council and our elected city attorney, you know, following the correction that the office issued regarding Councilwoman Doer, I think most of the members, I think all of us, had an understanding that, you know, there were difficult times ahead with this litigation, but that we would get better communication from the office as to the ins and the outs and the things that were coming. And it was like the next day that this hit. So I think that's pretty raw with everyone else too up on council, just in terms of being able to try to restore that part of the relationship so that we're more effective in all the different issues where the elected council and the elected city attorney have to work together on so many other issues, whether it's, you know, other liability situations, whether it's land use situations, whatever it is. You know, so much of the work of the city has to happen with good communication between the offices. So that, I just wanted to also voice that and make sure that that was out there and could be something that could be responded to.
No, and I also think too, there have been motions that have been filed that none of us are aware of, and, you know, I know that we've been very frustrated with a lot of the process. And then I just think, you know, asking those kinds of questions, I can't even imagine, and especially for the women that are sort of living this. And not only that, think about these women, this is right in the public eye. I mean, so to live it publicly too. And so I can't help but say that, you know, this just won't be tolerated. Not okay. So I guess, you know, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Hall, what you were thinking.
Well, Madam Mayor, first of all, you may know that there is a motion to recuse our office. So essentially, I have stepped out of the litigation piece and had my staff work on this, and it's been a team effort. I mean, it's been a very demanding on our resources. And I can tell you that there was no intent to disparage anybody or shame anybody with respect to this lawsuit. There was never that intent. My office would not engage in shaming activity. We never have, we never will. As a matter of fact, we have taken great efforts in the course of many investigations to ensure the integrity, not only the integrity of the investigation, but also protect the privacy of all those people involved. As Councilman McKenzie pointed out, it wasn't the city attorney's office who brought this question to the public eye. I'm not saying that I agree with the question being asked, or that it was a proper question to be asked, or condone any type of shaming, but it wasn't the city attorney's office who went to the press and started to accuse the city attorney's office of unfair practice. I can tell you that in light of these situation, that I'm definitely going to commit sufficient assets to ensure that we don't have any situations that are going to embarrass the city or discourage anybody from bringing forward a complaint for fear that they're going to be submitted to, you know, public ridicule or any kind of a disparaging comment. And certainly that's not what we're trying to do. As the elected city attorney, my job is to zealously represent the city and defend our scarce resources. And we are doing that very well. I mean, we're talking about one interrogatory that was, you know, those aren't filed in the public record. Those are submitted to an attorney. and they can object to it if they want to, or they don't have to. But to then make it, public fodder and accuse somebody of wrongdoing, I think that is a tactic on their part to try and influence you. And with respect to your question as to whether or not I'm going to recuse myself, I am not.
You're
I was
not going to
elected to
recuse
represent
yourself?
the
Okay.
city of Reno, and I plan on doing that
Okay.
zealously. Now, by the same token,
okay.
I am very sensitive to this issue, and as I indicated, I'm going to commit sufficient resources to ensure that we don't have issues in the future that are going to cause my council these types of concerns. I'm going to commit to open communication with my city council to make sure they know exactly what we're filing on these high-profile cases. And I'll give you every opportunity to review our pleadings prior to them being filed, should you request that.
Okay.
However, I will not be commenting on the litigation. It's inappropriate for me to talk about pending litigation, and I will not be commenting on this litigation further.
Okay. And one thing I do want to say is that you have some very talented attorneys in your department, and I have the honor to work with most of them on a daily basis, and some of the past attorneys that have been in your department. So I do want to clarify that you're very, very fortunate to have a tremendous team who works tirelessly for the city of Reno. So I do want to clarify that, because I don't want that to be clouded. But I also want to just clarify that you will not recuse yourself?
There's a motion to recuse our office already pending before the federal judge, Miranda Dew. So I think it would be
So we'll
prudent to wait.
You want
and
to
see.
wait for her? Okay.
I think that would be appropriate.
Personally, I'm not comfortable with it, and it becomes very challenging because I don't have, I can't make that decision on my own. I'm going to hand it to Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, thank you. To try and move things along and focus on the issue at hand is, after the news broke about Mr. Klinger, I never spoke with him again. But I did hear from both Mr. Hall and Ms. Stewart, who did have conversations with him, and it sounded like they had heard some possible retaliatory statements that I think are being vetted, and that always made me question whether or not he was in a position to represent us. But he has represented us to this point, and that question, because I'm not an attorney, is before the court. However, I will say, last week, before this news of this interrogatory came forward, we were sent a brief, and in reading that brief, the heading of the brief was incorrect on the title, and I also, in my very quick reading of it, saw an incorrect reference to one of the plaintiffs. One plaintiff was referenced when the other one was. I sent that to Mr. Shipman because I understand Mr. Hall, as to the best of his abilities, put a firewall in. And Mr. Shipman, you sent me an email back and said, "Good catch, speed kills." And that made me think, wow, I'm not an attorney, I'm reading this in 10 minutes and I'm finding flaws. And so if the mayor is able to get a motion, and it comes back to a subsequent meeting, I'll look forward to that discussion and consideration and weigh that. It sounds like Mr. McKenzie's not in favor, so maybe just 6 there. But I'm ready to go that way, and I am very concerned about the resources that we have, because got a lot of attorneys, but not everyone has the same expertise. And we've got Kathy Woods coming forward, and we have a class action suit up in the North Valleys, and I know those are really coming down the pipe. So I'm going to try very specifically to see what comes out of today, and if we have another decision to go for council up or down, that's the next avenue for our body, I think. So I just wanted to get that out of, that concern of mine on that pleading also, because I don't think I shared that with any of my colleagues. But I want to also, appreciate you acknowledging, the failures of your office in this matter. I haven't been really happy with the way that things have been done, but I think there's plenty of blame to go around in our organization. But I think we really need to be thinking about how to move forward. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councilman Bobsey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I wanted to return to a challenge that Councilwoman Dewar issued that I thought was very appropriate, and I think Mr. Hall could hopefully respond to this. she laid out sort of understanding that, yes, we do have this option, and maybe a vote does come back to us for a 6/7 charter vote to hire outside counsel. As been discussed, that would be a very pricey item if we were to do it. Councilman McKenzie pointed out that, it may not necessarily give us better results. I come back to what I stated earlier, which I believe that, unlike, as Mr. Delgado said, in private litigation in these matters, there is this very tricky balance that has to be struck between vigorous defense of the city and the taxpayers in such a way that is sensitive and inclusive of our values as a city. And that is a very tough thing to do, but it doesn't mean just because it's tough, we don't strive for it, and we got to strive for it. And I think in this case, clearly, we have fallen short and we can do better. One possibility may just be when I hear Mr. Hall say, I'm going to commit more resources. It's like, well, okay, great, but, I think we all know we're looking for some more specifics here. We're looking for some more specifics here in this room. I just wonder if another set of eyes from perhaps outside can come in and be part of this. Not really a compliance check, but somebody else who can say, hey, got experience with these. You guys are still running the show. Certainly there's the motion that's out there that has to play out, and I appreciate Mr. Hall flagging that. He has firewalled himself. As has been stated, we have incredibly talented people in the city attorney's office that represent us. But one possibility might be, let's bring somebody in. Sort of like the second opinion. It's kind of outside counsel, but it's not, right. It's not the 6/7 vote. It's not the bring in the big army and rack up the billables. But perhaps this whole situation could benefit going forward if there is another set of eyes on the team from the outside that can, kind of call some balls and strikes.
Vice Mayor Jordan.
Thank you very much. And my comments were kind of along that line and maybe prepared to, if we're styled to make any kind of a motion or recommendation here today. When you say sufficient resources, that is vague. But I do think, within the parameters of the city attorney's current budget, that there may be opportunities, as Councilmember Bobzian has suggested, to achieve some repair of what has been acknowledged here today and not have it be outside counsel in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We have lived that movie. I don't know that I'm in favor of going down that road again, but I think we need more information to better understand what your office is thinking, whom that may, be, and what that cost would be, and, side by side it with what full-blown outside counsel representation looks like. I think that is valuable for everybody to see the big picture. My question is this: on the current pending motion of the motion to recuse the city attorney's office on this particular litigation, I think the public would like to know when we think we might be getting a response to that.
I would think it would be in the next month or so. I mean, it's been pending for quite a while, so I would think within 2 months. But to address Councilman Bobzian's and your suggestion, I'm definitely willing to reach out to some of my colleagues throughout the city of Reno and find out who we might be able to bring into the office to review some of our pleadings, and I could pay for that out of my budget. Since we're talking about budget today, I am well within my budget. I do have the funds. I would be able to have somebody to come in, and they I could have them give you regular updates on the pleadings and what we're doing, and give you an opportunity to interact with somebody who has taken a look at where we've been and where we are, and so I think that is a very viable option and perhaps a good option that you might consider.
Thank you very much. And I was just trying to get a better timeline, so if we did style something, I'm not suggesting that's a direction this body would want to go, but I think it's important that we have the full picture and what that would look like, what the expertise would be, what the benefits to doing something like that would be in comparison to a full-blown outside council representation. So thank you very much.
Councilwoman Dorr.
Yeah, just to add something. You know, every sport, activity, the practice of law has rules of engagement. And we have gone deep, in my opinion, to press those things. You said the word that you're zealously pursuing. And I guess that concerns me because the direction of this question, and there may be other questions that we aren't aware of, seems to be to undermine the credibility of these women. And I think there's another way to advocate your case, which has to do with the issues. You know, did this cross a Title VII, EEOC, sexual harassment, hostile workplace, whatever the right terms are, did it cross that, and asking those questions, and if you believe it did not, then showing that it did not. I don't think it's necessary to attack the women who have come forward in best of intent, and because of them, we've fixed a whistleblower complaint. We've begun to address our environment. We're putting in new procedures because of them, which is something I wouldn't have been taking on this year. And so I guess from this council, I cannot accept this approach, even though it may be a winning legal strategy. At the end of the day, most federal litigation is resolved through mandatory first mediation, and then perhaps a different kind of mediation, and perhaps ultimately a settlement. But what I want the settlement, if we ever get there, to be about improving this place and restoring the honor of our employees, truly. So that's what's troubling me. You said, Mr. McKenzie, we have to lay out every single question. I don't think we need to. I think that we need to give some overall guidance, that it's not at least my intent to go after these women in any way, to undermine their credibility, which is what the purpose of that kind of question is. So I like the idea from Councilman Bobzian, but I guess I would take it a step further, and a step further than you have just taken it, which is I would like to see someone directing the strategy, even if they're using our team. Our team are very knowledgeable about this case. They've read all the pleadings, they've written the pleadings. But the thing is what is the strategy? And that's I see your face that you don't like what I'm saying.
No,
but,
that's not true at all.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
But what I don't like
Yeah.
is the accusation that I would engage in a shaming activity, and that is my strategy. That has never been the strategy.
Okay.
It's not the strategy now.
Okay.
It'll never be the strategy.
All right.
So
Well,
I
I'll
wanna
take
be
that. I'll
very clear
accept
on-
that.
I want to be very clear on that. That's,
Okay. Well, it
that's
had
not
the
what I'm trying
inadvertent.
to achieve here. And I can tell you that it's important to me, as it is important to all of you, to protect our employees. And due process is also important. I mean, and
Right.
that's what we're trying to achieve here,
Right.
is a fair process. And that's what we have engaged in so far, despite what people have claimed in the press. And we've made every effort to ensure that everybody is entitled to due process. Now, I am very sensitive to this issue. I mean, I hear my city council members. I'm not approving of any shaming tactic. I'm not going to engage in shaming tactic. I think the suggestion that we bring in another attorney into my office, to look at this, I think it's a good solution. And then you can really get a good idea of, what strategy we are going to take going forward. You probably know there's a motion to dismiss pending. That will hopefully clarify some issues for you as to what our strategy is. And so with that.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess I would just add that you brought in it, I mean, so many people in Reno have been involved in this case, heard about it, read about it in the paper, to your point, whether appropriately or inappropriately. All the pleadings are public. Anyone can read those. They're in a public federal docket. So I guess I would even encourage you to expand to, Madam Mayor, we brought on an attorney earlier to help us with the second investigation. I mean, I think you should at least talk to them too. At least they have some familiarity. They hired the investigator. It might be another path, just in other words, to not limit the pool. That's my thought,
Yeah, and one thing that I want to say, I'm not comfortable. I honestly, I'm not comfortable. And one of the things is that it kind of represents our vision and our values going forward. And so I kind of feel like at this point, this isn't what it represents. It just doesn't. And so to me, I would like the motion to, I would like to vote on going to outside counsel. I don't think we can at this time because it's not agendized, but that would be the direction I'm going in, and if that outside attorney wants to work with your office, I understand that. You're not involved in the process right now?
No.
You're not?
In the process of defending the case,
Right.
it has been assigned to other attorneys, yes.
Okay. So, but they would collaborate in some capacity, so at least one hand is speaking to the other.
Correct.
Is that?
Yes, yeah, so the idea would be you'd have, we'd interview some counsel who would be interested in reviewing our pleadings and making sure that they are framed in such a way as to not be, offensive. I mean, I want to make sure that we're not running afoul of any legal or ethical laws, and I think we've done that so far. Again, recognizing this particular issue and how offensive this is. So, I get it.
All right, Vice Mayor Jordan.
Thank you very much. I think we might be prepared to maybe make a motion. I'll throw something out there and see what the other council members' appetites are. My motion would be at this time to have a full presentation of potential options available to the council, up to and including securing outside counsel, to be presented at a future council meeting, in addition to what the city attorney's office plan would be for securing individual counsel. And so the public's not confused. There's outside counsel as in no more city attorney's office, all law outside, and hiring another outside attorney to come in to oversee the case. Bring all that back to us for this body's consideration.
I would second that, but ask for just a brief discussion on it. I want to be clear that if that motion passes, it's not just here's the budget sheets for each one of these and let's pick the cheapest one, right? It's also more fully fleshing this idea of individual counsel and what that can do in terms of what the expectations should be on the part of the mayor and the council of the city attorney's office if we were to be supportive of that direction, so that we have something clear in our hands that we can have for accountability purposes, that we could say, okay, you said you were going to, first we were going to just, okay, we're going to do more resources. Well, okay, now we're going to do individual counsel to supplement the team. Like, what would be the benefit to us in terms of regular communications, better development of strategy, just so we have a clear sense going into it what the benefit of that would be, and frankly, what the benefit of the other models would be. So again, not just show us the cheapest bid, what's the cheapest way for us to get through this. It's more, we need to have a full picture of what these different options mean so that we can not be up here having this conversation again.
All right, thank you. I would also add, Vice Mayor, I would like to see on the, also bring back on the agenda to go for outside counsel for 6/7 of a vote. I want that to stay on there.
I believe that was part of my motion. I agree with Councilmember Bob Zian's clarifications and augmentations of what the presentations would come back with.
Okay.
And a question for our manager, just, and I guess for Mr. Hall too. I mean, what are we talking in time frame? I mean, I don't know how much more,
Right. How much more we
how
can
much
take.
more time? Right, I mean, things are happening, continuing. You have to file more pleadings, I assume, or more interrogatories or whatever. I just wondered, when could this be agended? When could you have that kind of information for us?
We've already missed the deadline. For the record, Saber Newby, we've already missed the deadline for the 28th meeting, which is next week. Obviously, and the next regular meeting would be the 14th of March.
It's like too long for me.
Unless we did a special meeting, and we would have to coordinate all of your calendars in order to make that happen.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I would like to see it sooner than March 14th, because I just think that seems very far away. The Ides of March virtually.
I don't know that there's anything in between, though.
What's that?
Is there something in between that has to be?
Well, there's
No, but
pleadings going on every.
We can bring it back for a special meeting and just make sure everyone knows that we can get it on their calendars.
I mean, there's.
Okay? All right, Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and To make very clear, if we're going to use outside counsel, we need to use outside counsel. We've voted for outside counsel twice since I've been on this city council. And both times, we've had the city attorney's office involved in the outside counsel's activities. And if we don't trust the city attorney's office to handle this appropriately, we need to pick up the files and move them to an outside counsel's office and have that outside counsel handle it without interaction with the city attorney's office. Because if we're truly saying that we don't trust the city attorney's office to do this, we need to pick the stuff up and move it to another office and not have interaction between the two offices. Because I believe the last two times that we've used outside counsel since I've been on this council, that there has been a certain amount of influence on those outside counsels by the city attorney's office. And that completely eliminates the reason to use outside counsel. If we don't want the city attorney's office doing it, then it needs to go to outside counsel in its entirety. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Any further questions or comments from council? Seeing that there are none, so I have a motion from Vice Mayor Jardin. I believe I have a second from Councilman Bobzian. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you being here.
Madam Mayor, our next item is C1, follow-up presentations from,
Madam Clerk, do you mind? We would like to take a 15-minute recess. I need everyone to get up and go to the bathroom and get something to eat and drink, and so we can have energy to get back at this.
Madam Mayor, we can return at
15 minutes.
3:45.
All right, thank you very much.
Sam DNA Dene, there you go. Sex, scandals, racism, wacko freak media, wacko freaks, bringing it, stirred up the whole community. The whole community. And now the sex is gone. Oh, I'm kind of sexy a little bit, maybe, for an older dude. But anyway, the sex is gone, and everybody else is gone for the people out in TV land. 15 minutes ago, this place was jam-packed. It was like 20 degrees hotter in here. And then sex is gone. All the lies perpetrated by the media, that's all over with. The people are gone. And now, what do we have here? The beloved budget. The beloved budget. And who's the only one here other than staff members? Is there another citizen in the room who's going to talk on the budget besides Sam? Nobody's hand went up. No. Are you kidding? By the way, it's Friday evening now, almost evening. Most of those guys are down at happy hour. Sam's down here philanthropically defending the city and the citizens from nefarious, predatory things like the media. I didn't really have a whole lot to say. I don't know how you're going to vote on that deal, but I have a feeling that you're going to you're not going to vote 6 out of 7 to get an outside attorney. And I, as a citizen, do not think you should, because all of the people, and that's part of the budget that you're going to have to be analyzing, out of all the people who came up here to speak in that last deal where sex was the item, every one of them said, I read in the newspaper. Do you know how that almost made me puke right there on the floor? I read it in the newspaper. That's what they went on, ladies and gentlemen. I read it in the newspaper. That's my point. Now with the budget, I'm not speaking on a couple of things you got coming up, but on item 3 of the budget has to do with issues to put on the budget into the future. And that's why I'm only going to speak on one thing, unless you want to give me 2 hours to speak on a whole lot of things. I'm just speaking on one thing. And you're going to say, wait, it is a fact. The Reno media, especially the Reno Gazette, is a taxpayer-funded operation. It should be investigated just like that Mueller is investigating the Russian hackers. They should be, who knows what these wacko freak reporters, what is their background? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. How do you know they're not Russian plants or plants coming from Story County? By the way, Story County is having a special gathering tonight, and they're going to do some fundraising, and those people at Story County use the money that I helped them get by bringing Tesla there, $43 million, and they're going to use those taxes to try to fund one of the people who's running for mayor. That is wrong. Somebody should be investigating that, using our tax funds where they're having a fundraiser right now. At any rate, is everybody having a good time?
Thank you very much.
This is better than any of those shows on tonight.
Madam Clerk, do we have any further public comment?
Madam Vice Mayor, we have no further public comment on this item.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll turn it over to presentations and staff.
Good afternoon, Council. Today, we're going to go through some more budget items. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the follow-up items that we have from the last meeting that we had 2 days ago. There were some questions that we weren't able to answer and some data that you asked for, so we'll be providing that. And then we'll be going into the department's discussions, and you'll see that, the order of the departments when we get to that item. They'll be talking about their core services and some of their strategic plans and answering any questions you might have on their program change requests. And then if time permitting, we'd like to get the council's priorities for the fiscal year 18-19 budget. If we don't get through all that, we will need to schedule an additional meeting to get through it because it's important information. Like Sam said, it's unfortunate everybody left right before the most important thing we talk about, which is, of course, is our budget. So follow-up items we had from the last meeting. We had a number of items. So we were asked what the initial budget deficit was for fiscal year 16-17, because in the last presentation, we just showed you 17-18 and what we're projecting for 18-19. We unfortunately don't have that information, but we're estimating. So as you saw 2 days ago, the budget deficit for the last 2 years, this current year and the coming up year, is $5.5 million. Our estimate for the 16-17, when we ran the preliminary numbers, was around $7 million, but we don't have the exact dollar amount. The next couple items, you asked for some assumptions on our projections of how we develop the budget. Wanted to see the numbers for the entire budget and not just the general fund. Wanted to look at some revenue growth opportunities. We're providing some revenue growth opportunities along with the way our room tax is currently being used. So you can see there's some opportunity there. And in addition to that, council asked if fire and police could provide their overtime that they spend for vacancies when they have staff shortages. The fire department has included that in their presentation. The police department does not keep their records that way, so we'd have to do a little bit more analysis to be able to come up with a number for that. And then the last thing was on the garage funds. It was approximately $2 million that had been provided, and wanted to know how much of that remained. And so I'll just give you that information. It's not been confirmed with finance. We're looking at, there's a slight discrepancy in the numbers between the department and finance, and we'll be reconciling that over the coming week. But the total authorized funding was $1.77 million. And to date, we've spent just under $1.5 million of that. So there's still some funding available. But again, we're going to work on that discrepancy, and we'll have a better information maybe later next week. So.
Debbie, that funding is all allocated. It's part of it hasn't been paid out because it's under contract.
Right. Okay. So just as a reminder, the budget as originally developed for fiscal year 18-19, before we do any balancing, we do show a deficit of $5.5 million. The budget assumptions we used, so you can see that our tax growth, we're expecting about 3.5% for both property tax and the consolidated tax. We assume a 2% growth in business licenses, and we assume that our franchise fees will remain flat. As far as expenditures for the 18-19 fiscal year, our salaries and benefits really are based on our current staffing levels and the MOUs that are in place. So we've done that analysis. Basically, it's a budget by position. So the salaries and benefits are per the labor agreements. Our health insurance we have shown as flat. Workers' compensation and fleet we show as 10% increase, but as you see, workers' compensation, it has a little asterisk next to it. If you recall from the meeting on Wednesday, we talked about one of the balancing techniques could be to use this workers' compensation. It's a little under $700,000 for that amount of what was workers' compensation. And in addition, we've kept risk and supplies flat. So this is to show you the numbers associated with the rest of the budget. It is all the other funds. This does not include the general fund, but I can tell you if you add the general fund to the revenue, the general fund is $201.1 million for a total revenue for the entire city of $413.2 million. If you look at the expenditures, the general fund expenditures is $206.6 million for a total expenditure of $418.7 million. As far as opportunities for revenue growth, we continually assess our fees and opportunities that we have. That's mostly done at a department level that controls those revenues. As far as the fees and taxes, there's your fees have to be set based on a nexus that is associated with the cost of your of delivering the service. So when you're doing program revenues, it's really associated with the cost of delivering that program. And that's done through a nexus study generally to assume that you can't make a profit on the service you provide. Business license fees are essentially a tax, so they're not tied to the same cost as some of the other, as the fees are, but there is a cap. And we can, like I said, we continually to look at areas where we could possibly increase those. One area where we do have some flexibility is in how we spend our room tax. So we wanted to give you an idea of how the room tax is currently being spent. And we also have a recommended reserve amount on here, so you can see at the bottom line on the council's portion of the room tax, there's, if it's all spent according to the plan, there's about $60,000 available in the room tax to spend while remaining with the recommended reserve. If you look at the Park, Recreation, and Community Services room tax, if it's all spent according to the plan, there's about $176,000 remaining that could be spent on programs and services. So that's essentially the follow-up information. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them, or if there's any additional information you'd like, we'd be happy to get that for you.
Thank you very much. Council members have questions at this time. Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, on the slide about the revenue within the business license cap, and you say you're going to be looking at that, you know, an unfortunate thing is, I mean, I'm at the point where I just think Nevada's tax structure is like a hot, complicated mess, you know. We've got the redevelopment property disaster. We got the confusion with the utility thing, or the one that the state's working with AT&T impacts us also. We've got our own business license issues going on, working through. Probably be hearing more about that next year. But and the unfortunate thing is, with the cap on property tax, it's the businesses is where the room seems to be, and that's what the governor went to when he did what he did a couple sessions ago. But understanding as that may be, that seems like the only latitude we have. And as you go on that analysis, I just like to say that from my perspective, we spend so much money of our own local funds on streets and roads, and I think that I would be examining businesses where their place of business is our streets and roads. And so that's all of those folks who are driving up and down our streets and roads all the time doing their business there. And we can all guess who those are. Those are the ones who bring boxes to our front doors and pick us up when we don't want to drive and that sort of thing, deliver stuff. So that's just my feedback as you do that analysis, how I would like to see that segmented sector looked at. Thank you.
Very much. Other council members have any questions? Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you. And the fees we charge in community development, how do we figure those fees for?
For the record, Jill Olson, Finance. That was included in the fee study, and it's associated with the cost for delivering the service.
Okay, so, but we have, if I'm not mistaken, we have a flat rate for different services. For example, well, a good example is a PUD that we just did. The cost for that PUD, is that the same as I mean, when they submit that PUD and they pay the fees for that, is that fee for the community, to the community development, is that based on a flat fee for a PUD application, or is that based upon the 16 months of work that community development had to put in to developing that PUD and get it through the council?
I think the director is going to answer that question. I think they allow now for a more appropriate fee structure so that they'll charge for, they may have different prices depending on the type and the nature of the PUD.
Thank you, Councilmember. Madam Vice Mayor, if I may address, we last year adjusted our PUD schedules. For example, we have 3 rate structures now to address that particular issue. I think your question is, does this accurately reflect the exact amount of man hours or human hours that are put into a project? No, they do not. They're just rough estimates based on how long we think it will take. There are some PUDs that take a lot longer than the amount that we charge for them.
Well, and more directly is, in that particular case, the amount of paper and copying fees that were included in that to develop all of those packets for different meetings and stuff that, I mean, we cut down 2 redwood trees for paper for that project, and that's a huge expense on us, and we read those in those copying costs in our expenditure reports every month, every meeting, and those, some way or another, we should be getting those back to where we should be revenue neutral on something like that. They should pay for every man hour and every piece of paper and every eraser that gets broken. And at the end, it shouldn't cost us anything for them to submit something like that. And I think that that's one of the holes that we create, that, I mean, community development should pretty much be self-sustaining, because you're reviewing applications that demand man hours, and if we're charging the fee that's appropriate for the man hours that are demanded, then we should be revenue neutral on that. And I think it will probably, if we looked at that, we're far from revenue neutral on it.
I would agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other council members? Nope. Continue on.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the departments. The next 2 slides really are just give you an idea of the order they're going to come in. So we're going to start with our police department and followed by dispatch.
Well, good afternoon. Reno Police Chief Jason Soto, and I want to thank all of you for hearing this short presentation that I have for you today. I'm going to try and keep it as brief and precise as I can, but there are a few things that I want to point out to to this council. So, in terms of our departmental core services, partnering with our community to create a safe city by providing the highest level of police services. As I mentioned at our last meeting, we are responding to many more calls. We are using different levels of intelligence-led policing, and what I mean by that is data to be more efficient in how we respond to those calls and, to put it simply, to catch more crooks. We now have our front desk in full operation. That front desk allows us to afford a higher level of police services simply because they're handling what we call cold cases, so that our sworn officers can be out there to respond to emergencies. We also have our community service officers, which is a very important element of our department. And community service officers also go out and take cold calls, but they do that out in the field. And then, of course, we have our wonderful SAVE volunteers who give us about 20,000 volunteer hours every year to this community. Responding to calls for service in a prompt and courteous manner. As these calls continue to go up, you will probably see those call times go down on lesser priority calls. But we do prioritize. Dispatch does a great job in prioritizing which calls are priority ones and which ones are not. And our priority one response time has been pretty steady now for the last 2 years. Implementing intelligence-led policing practices to solve crimes. Again, I spoke about that earlier. Our crime analysis division is probably one of the most busy divisions because we really only have one dedicated full-time person in crime analysis. She does a great job, but understand that she does the work for not only all of the requests that I give her and my staff and officers give her, but also requests that this council asks me for. So she's a very, very busy woman. Hence the reason I need one more of those positions at some point. Adequately train newly hired officers. Training is one of the most important things that police officers have to have on a regular basis to really lessen our liability when they're out on the street. We do a great job of that. We not only have our academy that you're all familiar with, but last year we began implementing critical incident training for all of our sworn police officers to address the growing mental health issues that we have been seeing and recognizing in our community. We also like to use our training budget. We do have a training budget to send our officers and detectives to training that creates better officers and allows them to do a better job, and because they know more. Evaluate effective deployment of police resources. Again, that's my job. Every 6 months we bid. When we bid, we do often change those numbers and deployment areas and where we deploy our personnel. And I use, again, ILP to do some of that preparation in terms of how I deploy our officers, but that is always a moving target. And then the last bullet point on this page, limit gang-related crime through aggressive law enforcement efforts. In the past 12 months, we have really put an emphasis on our focus on gangs and aggressive law enforcement efforts. We have added 2 additional gang officers to our gang unit. We have also established a working relationship with the FBI and the DEA that has been more successful than ever. This is a regional unit that involves the Sparks Police Department and the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. And right now we have a total of 16 personnel in our gang division. And they're doing a fantastic job. They've been very busy, but they're doing a great job. Going on to the next page, provide a high visibility law enforcement presence in the downtown area. I know a lot of attention is brought to downtown. We've made several efforts to improve our downtown presence. to include the downtown walking team, our debt team or our bike officers, and then our central divisions. I would like to add additional officers to every area of the city, but right now I think we have more resources downtown than we do elsewhere. And our big focus really has been with that downtown walking team to have presence down there and the ability to interact with issues that are occurring in the downtown area. It has been very successful. Thorough investigation of crimes resulting in apprehension of offenders and recovery of stolen property. Traffic law enforcement and public education to reduce property damage, injuries, and deaths associated with traffic crashes. We have seen a large increase in traffic accidents. The most disturbing are, of course, our fatals, and we are really putting a lot of attention on our traffic division. We've added one DUI officer that has had an incredible effect on our within our traffic division. But that is definitely an area that seems to be growing quicker and quicker and outgrowing the pace of our ability to staff our traffic division. Plan, administer, and coordinate the resources necessary to ensure cost-effective and efficient provisions to the department. Provide the highest level of victim-centered services and resources through the Victim Services Unit. Just a real quick note on our Victim Services Unit. I believe that that is one of the finest victim service units in the country. It's something that other agencies are beginning to model their departments and their cities after. When we had the tragedy in Las Vegas at Mandalay Bay, they contacted the Reno Police Department to ask for our assistance, specifically related to victim services, because of the model that we have here at the Reno Police Department. We also have a new triage in our front, as you enter our front desk area where they take the reports. And this is also victim services related. The reason that we have implemented that triage is for somebody who is a victim of, say, a violent crime such as a sexual assault. We triage them to an expert in sexual assaults. And it is much less humiliating for them to have to report that type of crime, and it's in a much more comfortable environment for victims. Partnerships with volunteer organizations provide additional resources at no cost to the city. On this PowerPoint, I have 360 Blueprint, TIP, SAVE, and our faith-based groups. I cannot say enough about this community and how they step up to help out our agency and our entire community with volunteer services. Our primary goals, we really need to increase our efficiency of online reporting. We're in the process of that right now. We have just received a grant to help us improve that process, and I'm looking forward to it. Reorganization of dispatch services under the police department purview. We have an incredible dispatch center that works diligently day and night, 24/7, for our public safety, and I believe that with the assistance of Reno Police Department and Reno Fire Department, we can address some of the challenges that they have to include personnel shortages and equipment shortages. But I'll let our Assistant Director get into that in a moment. Mandatory body camera deployment. We had just recently, on July 1st, we're going to have mandatory body cameras for all of our police officers in the state of Nevada. We have created policy. Policy is in place. We're working out a few minute details with our associations, but we will have that in play before the July 1 deadline. We've been working with the 911 committee. We have several representatives on that to establish funding for these body cameras. The challenging piece of the body camera in terms of funding is the personnel to manage that workload that body cameras create, and I would call that, in simplistic terms, the back end. After we record all this video, we need to have somebody manage that data, redact certain individuals from that data, and we have to pay for that personnel. So that's personnel that I'm going to have to dedicate at least 2 persons to manage all of that data that will be coming in as a result of these mandatory body cameras. Oh, sorry. And then addressing challenges posed by annexation and population increase. All of you are very aware of our annexations and the population increase. We have done many things at the Reno Police Department to stretch our resources. Like all departments, we are extremely thin in a lot of different areas. Our resources are about as stretched as they can be to make sure and maintain the safety of this city. However, I'm proud to say that we do a fantastic job of doing that, but we have to keep up with growth. That's just that simple. And then finally, opportunities. Increase in resource allocation to homelessness. We've been talking a lot about the bid. I think this council is very aware of what we hope that bid will help create, and we're excited to hopefully realize some impacts to our downtown and our entire community at large. Reorganization of executive staff to strengthen the department vision. I've been having conversations with our city manager as to how I would like to do this, but it's something that I think this agency needs moving forward. We have a very small executive staff. Currently, it's myself, 2 deputy chiefs, and 2 commanders. That is a very small amount of individuals to do a very large amount of work. So I'm looking at some restructuring of that executive staff and making some changes to hopefully strengthen that in the future. Increased demand for traffic enforcement at high crash locations and unsafe pedestrian walkways while working with limited personnel. We've done a few small things to help address this. I want to thank our council, specifically Councilwoman Doer, with a lot of these traffic issues, and Vice Mayor Jarden. We do have a trailer that we just recently purchased that will help with some of these high traffic areas and hopefully slow down some of that traffic. And then we do an extremely large amount of service requests for all of these neighborhoods that are complaining of speeders in their neighborhood or traffic issues. We also work well with our traffic, with our engineering division, and we're always looking at addressing maybe some change in the whatever the issue is on a particular intersection. And then finally, additional workload on patrol officers, detectives, and support staff with the legalization of marijuana. So once the marijuana was legalized, we started tracking crime in relation to where marijuana was identified as a factor. And what we realized is that it does create more work for us. We knew that once the legalization of marijuana became a reality, that there was probably going to be some crime or some traffic-related issues that were associated with that, and we were right. So we're identifying that, and I'll keep this council appraised as to just how much of an effect that has on our resources. So with that is the end of my very short PowerPoint for you, and I will open it up to questions if you have any.
All right. Thank you very much. First of all, you are one of those departments, I got to tell you, that you do so much more with less. It is unbelievable what you have been able to do, not only with the incredible department, but the building.
Yes, our classic building that we love.
The classic building you love. Well, I got to tell you, I mean, what you did even with a coat of paint is pretty remarkable. But I love how you did change, the front, and I've gotten great feedback on all of that because I know that you would have victims that would come in, and it would be a very delicate situation. So I just want to say you have done a phenomenal job, and I know it hasn't been easy. So I just want to commend you to the moon and back.
Breckus? Echoes to you and everyone there. You guys really are doing great work, and I'm just, I'm so appreciative, and I have so many positive interactions with everyone down the rank and file all the time, and you too. Few questions. And I just, I'm going off of what I have in front of me. The evidence tech and the police assistant for the body cams, you don't have that ranked as a priority? Is that because you feel it's a mandate and,
You mean for the positions?
Yeah, I don't see those as a rank.
Well, they are, I believe they are,
There's a dashed line when it says the priority.
well, when we put this together, we were waiting on an opinion in terms of how we were going to fund that. We were hopeful that the funds coming out of the 911
Yeah.
would help pay for those. We've since learned and got a legal opinion on that they will not.
Okay.
So it falls down back on our shoulders, so that priority has jumped a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
But those are two positions, the two that we had identified that would fill those would be an evidence tech and an OA2. And those will be two full-time positions, and that will be their job really is to manage that data. It's gonna be a lot of work.
Okay. I mean, the priority may not matter because the manager and the finance director aren't identifying any growth, for positions for your department, and I understand that. I was wondering if maybe it was the dash line there because you did feel you had a funding source coming in that we would be seeing, but it doesn't sound like that's worked out that way, which is unfortunate. And then way down at the bottom of the list, the assistant police chief, I thought I saw somewhere, and the narrative is position will be a closer link between the chief than currently exists between the chief and the deputy chief. I thought you said you had 2 deputy chiefs.
We have 2 deputy chiefs currently. So the way the structure is today is you have the police chief, or the
Yeah.
Chief of police.
Yeah.
You have 2 deputy chiefs and 2 commanders.
Yeah.
What I'm proposing at some point is a assistant police chief for a separation between the chief of police and the 2 deputy chiefs. That would be an at-will position. I think that's important moving forward to have that at-will position. Not so much for myself, although it is something that I would definitely could use and would appreciate. But moving forward in an organization of this size, when you bring in a police chief, whoever that is, and I had a lot of growing pains in learning this over the past 3 years, you need a assistant chief that shares that same vision. And I'm not saying that I'm not very fortunate with my 2 deputy chiefs that have stepped up to the plate and share my same vision. But in the world of policing, that proves to be very, very challenging. And it's a very, very important position to establish. And that's why you see most large agencies do have some type of assistant chief or commissioner or something to that effect. The deputy chiefs are protected under civil service.
Yeah.
The chief and what I would propose as an assistant chief would not have that.
Sure, and just like our city manager just brought a chief of staff, but the narrative says deputy chief, so it seemed to me like you were thinking maybe of just doing 1 deputy chief and then making a new assistant chief, and then...
There's several ways that I could
Okay.
accomplish that,
Okay.
and I haven't dove into that.
Okay.
But no, I would
Okay.
prefer to have 2 deputy
Okay,
chiefs.
and it's your 7th priority. And then, did I see somewhere else, maybe not on this one, they handed out elsewhere, that you have a payout that you're asking for on a retirement? Did you have a high-level retirement payout request? Was that you, or?
It could be with the Reno Police Department with retirees.
Okay,
There are payouts upon their retirement.
okay.
So if they accrue vacation time, sick time, and comp time, there are cash outs. Now, I will make a point that since 2008, we have remained under budget as the Reno Police Department to include payouts every year except for 2010, which is when we had the huge amount of officers that retired, and there were a lot of payouts that were experienced that year. But yes, if there's a 20-year officer or 25, 30-year officer, and he or she retires, then there will be payouts associated with that retirement.
Sure, sure, and our policy's been to leave those vacant, but then we're trying to get away from that too, right?
We're trying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, it's, as far as I can see, I just want to confirm my understanding that it is a no-growth positions, no growth of positions to the police department, even to meet that state mandate, because that didn't come with a revenue source. So that's what our manager is saying is within our abilities. So, okay, thank you. All right, Councilman Bobzien? No, okay. Councilman Delgado?
Just real quick, of course, Chief Shuttle, thank you for all your service and to all the men and women, especially in terms of the community outreach that you guys have had. I think it's in many different ways, right? I think it's added a lot of value and efficiencies in terms of hopefully lowering your guys's, in terms of historical, back in the day tactics. It's more of a just building relationships. And to that point, I know you had stated on one of your PowerPoints the amount of work that you guys are working with other volunteer services. Is the cost efficiencies of maybe bringing some of that in-house, has that ever been a part of the conversation? And I say that with respect to maybe some of these community relationship outreach folks may be cost a little bit less than your full uniformed, but they're doing just as much of a great work in terms of building those relationships so people better understand the dynamics of enforcement in their neighborhoods. What's been that conversation?
We've certainly had conversation with some of our volunteer groups, specifically 360, just because 360 works closely with law enforcement, and it was our initiative as the Reno Police Department. They have a director, Nathan Dupree, that runs that nonprofit, and there has been discussion on finding a way to obtain a position to where we could all of these nonprofits have a huge challenge in terms of funding.
Oh, no problem.
It's extremely difficult to fund these programs. On the same hand, what we get out of those programs is unmeasurable.
Sure.
And the value it brings to our community. So yes, we've had those discussions. I would love to see something like that occur in the future. It really comes down to whether or not we can find money to do that.
Okay. And I only bring that up understanding that I know you guys asked for how many police officers?
6 police officers.
6 new police officers. Okay. And just trying to figure out, understanding the situation we're in with their revenue and expenses. Is there, I mean, of course you would rather have a uniformed police officer out there that can do multiple things, but in the worst case scenarios of things, we also have an opportunity of maybe working closely or with some of these nonprofits that are out there building and consistently building those relationships and give them a sustainable revenue source. And I was just kind of wondering where you are with that, and also
Yeah, I'm
how
very
does one
aware.
balance the others, but somewhat it's still difficult, not the same. It's kind of like apples and oranges, but
Right.
providing
No, I'm very
police
aware
service.
of the cost of a police officer and that they're expensive. On these these requests that I put in, I want to say there was 16 positions that I put in for, and 7 of them are sworn, 9 of them are non-sworn, because non-sworn simply don't cost as much. That would be a non-sworn position, and I do understand the value of our support staff, and I appreciate the value of our support staff, and I made a commitment to our support staff to try and build those numbers. That would be one of those numbers, and again, I agree.
Well, again, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Jordan?
Thank you very much. Always love hearing your presentations and hearing all the good stuff you guys have going on. I did have a question, and maybe this is for general budget question here. We had $5.5 million deficit as presented to us on the overall budget. The budget last cycle, last year was $5.5 million as well. Does this year's, and again, we're carrying some significant debt from years past that we continue to pay down. Two things. What in the last year of that debt did we pay down? I know we've paid down significant amount over the tenure we've been on the council, but I'm kind of curious in the last year what we've paid down on that debt. And then two, even though we're still at the same level of debt as prior year, we added 8 bodies this last cycle, correct? So to just clarify those two, if you could.
For the record, Jill Olson, we did add, I know we added at least 7, could have been 8 for the general fund. And then as far as the debt, we paid probably $30 to $40 million annually. It goes down.
Okay, so we paid down $30 to $40 million in debt in the last year. We added 6 people to the police department, and I think we added a code officer and someone in building. Am I missing anybody?
Business.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand, while it's still, none of us like to hear $5.5 million, I wanted to make sure everybody kind of understands that we did add some needed bodies last year, and we paid down $30 to $40 million in debt.
We did. And to clarify, the debt is, only a small fraction of that is related to the general fund, so it's all non-general fund for the most part.
All right, thank you very much. The other thing, I know you'll be coming back to give us a full presentation on the new traffic trailer thing. I wanted to thank you for taking that. For the council members, it was a community-initiated item from a member out in Somerset. We all get frustrated when people continue to blow through speed signs and enforcement issues, and you guys can't be everywhere all the time consistently. So you came up with this concept of the trailers, which we used up near the Bonanza Casino. If you remember, before they put the permanent light in, there was a construction trailer that had a message on it that basically said pedestrians awareness, that sort of thing. So the concept was to have our PD roll one of those out, movable in the community, with a message to say, let's say it's out in Somerset, it could have a unique message that says seniors at play, or something like that to catch people's attention. It would also capture their, some of the traffic data.
Yes.
But then it could move, and it could move to South Reno, and it could say, watch for horses. And it's another tool, a creative way, and I appreciate you running with that idea.
No, and I want to thank you for that. And to add to your point about the traffic data, the important piece to that is it allows us to understand if there really truly is an issue, a traffic-related issue. We'll just use speed as an example. A lot of speeders, this will capture what that speed is, and it'll share with us that data so that we can do a better job of, again, allocating our resources, traffic resources to specific areas within Reno. So thank you for all your constituents for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Dorr.
Thanks for being here, Chief. I too have had just super positive relations with every officer I've met, whether it's out on bike patrol or, at an event like last night with the tips, which Councilman McKenzie was actually honored, just for the benefit of the rest of the council. He got a Hero with a Heart award. It looks like I'm embarrassing him. Good. And but he deserved it, and you guys are there to support everything from things like that, your tip volunteers, to helping me with a person who threw a dog at the Virginia Lake Dog Park, from the most mundane to helping deal with the horses out in South Valleys, out in South Reno, to this most recent accident, which resulted in a death. I understood personally went out there to check out what we could do. I went out there myself yesterday with some of the friends of Bonnie, the woman who was killed, and came up with some innovative ideas that I'm going to share with our public works staff, as a workaround. But I guess my question would be, in terms of traffic law enforcement and public education, I guess I'm wondering, is there something we can do? Would slower speeds throughout our city help? Would radar, I know we've put radar speed signs in Virginia Lake area, up on Ridgeview where we have a lot of speeding. That was recommended to me yesterday by some of the citizens, that people are overdriving the speeds as it is. 45, they're going 55. So lowering it to 35 might get them going 45. But I just wonder if it would also
help you with your workload. I mean, we don't want people getting killed, and we don't want to get hurt. So I'd like to get some feedback on that.
So, yeah, so in certain areas, I do believe that speed studies should be done to see whether or not the speed limit should be changed. In some areas, I think that it should be looked at to where maybe we could increase the speed.
Sure.
You know, you get a lot of different complaints, and I agree. Human life is our number one priority, and we don't want to see anybody losing their lives on the road. So if we find an area that we think is dangerous, we will certainly get together with our engineering department as well as all of our council to keep them appraised as to some initiatives that we think we could take, to include looking at speed. So yes, the flashing lights, again, it depends on where it's at as to whether or not it'll be a benefit or whether it would actually slow traffic down. Our infrastructure here is tight in the Reno area. You only have a couple real major thoroughfares. I know we're making some improvements and we're adding some roads like the Southeast Connector to lessen some of that congestion. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to stay on top of it. And when we see issues, take a look at them. And again, I know that you all hear from your wards, your constituents. And when those are brought to our attention, we'll be happy to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. And I want a shout out to Public Works too. You mentioned getting a trailer. They redeployed. I think they have 4. One was out of service. Maybe they have 2, and I think they rented 2 to help with the horses actually. So we don't have a lot of these. And if they work, you know, whether it's to draw attention to a seniors crossing or it's a horses crossing, if they work, maybe we need more of those and less, you know, in our inventory. So it's an idea, you know, because they're very shorthanded, I know. I have 2 more questions. One's on online reporting. I know this has been a mission of yours to make it so that when the citizens send in their challenges, requests, crimes, that would go seamlessly into a database and could be responded. And would you just give us a moment on that, like where we are and what do you expect in this coming year?
Well, we just received a grant, as I stated, through our Victim Services Unit. Our front desk handles a large majority of our reports, and it's 2018, and a lot more people are reporting online.
Yeah.
And we are trying to simplify that process. We're trying to create a program that does a better job at responding with our system, our Tiburon system that keeps track of all of that information, to simplify it on the back end for our officers, for our detectives, but also simplify it for the user, whoever it is that is reporting it. It's challenging on how these instruments, these different programs talk to each other, and we're trying to create a better experience for everybody.
So I guess I would ask our manager and you to work together, maybe to set some metrics, because IT projects are always challenging, and you're always fixing bugs. We hear this all the time with Acela, with this one, with that one. So it's a forever, but I would love to know if we could put enough resources on it to get it done in this fiscal year. You know, to where we say if somebody reports something online or even through my RPD app, that would go someplace and it would help you and relieve some stress on your office-oriented civilian staff that I know kind of do these transfers of data.
Yeah, and I have made that a priority to do that in an expedient manner.
Okay.
I also want to give a thank you to our IT here in the city of Reno and working with our department and our staff in simplifying that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And simplifying that process.
That'll wake you up when you hear your name, right?
We've been working actually quite a bit together, and
Good job.
we've made a lot of progress.
Well, I'm just suggesting that, you know, I know in IT projects, if it's Rishma, that you schedule them out and there's certain milestones, and I'd just love to see maybe what those are and, you know, what we can expect this year. And then lastly, I note that you have a whole other presentation on public safety dispatch, and I just was wondering 2 things. One, I mean, so the reorganization is moving it out of what? Out of the finance department where it was?
Correct.
Okay, over to you and
Correct. And public safety.
together, public safety?
Well, the idea is that there'll be a section of the Reno Police Department, but we understand that dispatch, fire has many needs of dispatch as well. So
Right.
we'll have liaisons with both departments.
Okay.
With our Assistant Director, Jenny Hansen, facilitating a lot of that.
Okay, so just a change of leadership, not necessarily increase of budget or reorganization, or are you thinking maybe reorganizing the people in dispatch too, or?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
The dispatch has, I'll let Ms. Hansen get into that, but
All right.
they have a lot of challenges just in terms of.
I know, hiring.
Very similar with the Reno Police Department. It's a tough job.
Okay. And then lastly, the homelessness, when you say increased resource allocation to homelessness, so we're putting in the bid, and I guess I just want to make sure I have queued up expectations. So my thought was in putting in the bid that we would be bringing in additional resources, more social services, ambassadors, people to help offload our, police officers to get them doing police officer work more in line. But are you thinking then it would result in an increase of police officers dealing with homelessness, or are you thinking in the rest of the city, or what were you thinking?
There's a lot of options. If the bid is successful in terms of dealing with some of the things that take a lot of time from the police department, if the bid is successful at, let's just use mental health as an example, having an ambassador work with them, getting these individuals to resources, that does free up my officers to do police work. Some of those resources could be reallocated to patrol. Some of those resources could be reallocated to like our community action officers who focus on things like, camps and
Right.
So it just allows me a bevy of opportunity in terms of reallocation. But again, we got to see how that
plays out.
Plays out. Yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And a couple of things that popped into my mind. One of them is the body cameras, and I saw the level we came out with funding for the 911, and I know that wasn't where we hoped they were going to come down on that. Is that going to fully fund our body cameras? Are we going to be able to fully fund ours out of there?
We believe that we will fully fund our body cameras. The further challenges of that is that out of that fund, there are a lot of needs outside of just body cameras when it comes to infrastructure and our radio systems and our antiquated.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, okay.
Is there going to be funding left over because we need to do that update in the dispatch still, and is there going to be funding left over to do the dispatch updates that we need, or did they skimp by as low as they could just to get the minimum amount for the body cameras?
Well,
Oh, yeah.
it's my understanding that it was a challenge to get up to that 85 cents. Initially, it was not 85 cents. It was even lower than that. We would have liked to have had the full dollar increase because the overages you pool and you can use for those major projects. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that in terms of with our two sitting members on that board, which would be Deputy Chief Enzon and Assistant Director Hansen, as to whether or not it is going to be enough. And if it's not, then obviously we'll need to revisit that 85 cents.
Okay, and then my final question on 911. Did they move forward with the audit of the wireless system? Because I understand the wireless carriers have been way underreporting.
I think there's some work to do,
'Cause
left to be done.
if I'm not mistaken, AT&T probably owes the 911 system more than the state owed them, but that's just from the preliminary findings that I saw from the report. There's no doubt you guys do more with less, and there hasn't been a ride-along that I've been on that I haven't watched that computer screen completely full of calls that officers don't have the freedom to patrol. And I mean, we talk about community policing. A lot of that is the opportunity to interact with citizens in a non-call status that them feel more comfortable with the police officers. And as long as we're facing the staffing level issues that we have, and we don't get that, we can't really reach the goals that we'd like to see as a department for community policing. So it's still pretty important that we get as many officers on the street as we can. And we're going to be, if we don't fund these 2 data positions for the body cameras, you're probably going to be either pulling a uniformed police officer off to, or 2 to do that. So that's probably 2 more bodies off the street. And those are sworn officers that are going to end up doing that instead of non-sworn personnel. And then the analysis that you position that you were looking for to help with your intelligence practices. Again, another area that to improve your ability to provide services that may require a uniformed officer to do that. And I understand there's times that you can cover those with officers that are on restricted duty and stuff, but it's still officers off the street, and those officers are on the street are ultimately the ones that
Thank you, Councilman, for bringing that up. That's a critical position, and to answer that question, no, even a sworn officer just wouldn't have the wherewithal to understand how to work those reports. You need a genius, really, working that position, and that certainly isn't me or
so a dispatcher then. Huh?
Yeah, well, so it's a crucial, and the demand on that, the reason that's such an important position, the data, crime analysis data person, is because it helps us catch the crooks. And that's extremely important in terms of our efficiency in this community.
And then just a couple kudos I'd like to hand out to the department. One is the assignment of the officer to the task force for the Human Trafficking Task Force. That brought us a lot of assets to our community that we didn't have. We got one officer assigned to that, and I think that's a 20-person task force that brought to our community to help us with that very overwhelming issue in our community. So kudos on that. And then I also like to thank the officer that showed up the morning I was principal for a day and actually patrolled the school zone out there for the day I was principal for a day and made stops. And I got to listen to people complain about getting tickets for speeding in the school zone.
Sorry about that. No, thank you. And I just really quick, I wanted to recognize the men and women of the Reno Police Department. They are they're what makes this operation work. I'm simply the figurehead, but they are the ones that are out there doing all of the work on a daily basis with a great attitude, with great professionalism. And I also realize that we have the largest department in the city, and I certainly like to share those resources with every department that I can, and we will continue to do that as much as we can with our resources.
You guys do a great job of working with your sister agencies too, and I hear nothing but praises from the men and women of our department from Sparks and Washoe County when I'm around them. So appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you.
Great job.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing Assistant Director, Jenny Hansen of Dispatch.
All right, great. And then I just wanted to let everyone know after dispatch, then we're going to cut this meeting short. I know it's Friday, and I'm up here a little tired, so I know you guys are, and it's been a long week, so I want to make sure everyone gets home to their families, okay? So we're going to let you take it away, and then thank God it's Friday, right?
Let's see, yes. For the record, I'm Jenny Hansen, Assistant Director at Reno Dispatch, and thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'll make this quick in response to the time of the day and my colleagues to my right. But first, to answer Councilman McKenzie's question regarding the audit, I learned last week from the State Commission on Communications meeting, actually, that on the 28th, next week, Washoe County IT is hearing responses to the RFP for those audits, and the respective consultants will be presenting their best dog and pony show to pick them to conduct the audit. Now, the issue is certainly about the money, but no doubt that the carriers are collecting. The issue is remittance and whether they're remitting to the respective jurisdictions. And Washoe County IT manages the telephony piece to 911 and also creates the budget for the advisory board. We'll review very quickly the high-level core services, but all of them are tied to our strategies, and I'll talk to those more in a minute. But ultimately, our core service is to maintain an effective and efficient and professional dispatch center, to train and develop professional employees, not just on the job initially for their careers, but throughout their careers. That's, again, we're striving for that in a strategy. To enhance the service levels to the public and all the user agencies in this region, to maintain incident records in accordance with NRS, local and state requirements, and certainly partnering with our city clerk's office to fulfill those public records requests. And we're seeing more and more of those. You hear from her all the time about the number of public records requests that are increasing. We see those as well from the law enforcement and fire records as well. We're maintaining all the incident records and audio recordings from not just the computer-aided dispatch, but the audio recordings from the radio and the 911 system alike. We're partnering, also, we talked about the evidentiary recordings. We're fostering positive working relationships with all internal and external customers. I won't go into all the evidentiary pieces because that's on, but that's an obligatory service and one we do very well and professionally and thoroughly in accordance with all policy issues and NRS guidelines. The strategic planning piece is interesting in that when I first started here in early September of 17, I looked at number one priority is staffing, and that will always be our number one priority. In our authorized numbers, we're today at a count of 55 total, and that includes my office. Authorized staffing hasn't changed in over 14 years. It's probably longer, but I stopped at year 14. And we've appreciated a 4.2 increase every year in our volume. That's not a nice number to have by way of increase in our volume, because volume to us means somebody's worst day. Nonetheless, priority is given to our staffing to address those people with their worst day. So we had a workload staffing analysis and a staffing analysis conducted, and with that 4.2% increase, in order to accommodate current workloads, our authorized 55 should really be at 70. And by the year 2020, with the projected increases, our number from 55 today should reflect 84. So it's likely that we'll be back to the lectern in the course of the coming years. Second strategy is to recruit, screen, and select qualified staff. In order to get to the authorized staffing level of hiring, we also had to take a good hard look at how we recruit, select, screen, and ultimately train the people so that we can retain that level of authorized staff. It's inherent for me and the rest of the supervisors to maintain and manage the job complexity of what we do with the ongoing evolution of technologies, not just with 911 telephony, with regard to next generation 911 and all things IP. Oops, sorry. I really blew it here, push the button. We are looking at radio issues concerning all things FirstNet with the state. We have to follow closely the goals of the vendors, where their roadmaps are headed in the technologies, and make sure that we have no degradation of levels of service for any of our partner agencies or agencies that we support, and that we are certain to maintain continuity of operation regardless of where the vendors are going in their roadmaps. So we have to manage that very carefully and watch that very closely, not just locally here, but regionally and statewide. There are a number of state mandates that impact us, as you well know, and we have to make sure we're ready to follow suit so that all the millions of dollars we're spending, we're headed in the same direction. Ultimately, I need to take care of basic needs for all of us. They're human beings first, then they have families, and then they have a job. I have to look to maintaining and supporting each one of those factions. Otherwise, they're not doing a service to us as dispatchers if they're not taking care of items 1 and 2. And that's my mantra and always will be. We're looking at maintaining and continuing to enhance center performance and always reaching out to our agencies and stakeholders to determine what their needs are, look at their functional requirements, what they want to achieve. You know, the local hot topic with the fire department is AVL and all things regional. In looking at that enhancement, we too are working shoulder to shoulder to put our heads together and assure that we're there to support them whenever they're ready. And that's all I have if you have any questions.
I think you did a fantastic job. I can tell you're very good at what you do. You care.
I do care. Thank you.
I can tell. That's really, it's nice.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with Councilwoman Breckus. I'm going to ask council if they have any questions.
You know, I don't really have any questions. I think, you know, I've always felt that dispatch is probably one of the hardest jobs to do in a city organization, and I've worked for 3 cities, so I've seen a lot in terms of the structures. It is stressful, I know, and it's sad to see that we can't add positions. I wish we could. I had an experience last week. I was at a restaurant, and someone went down. It was a small restaurant, and 2 people, we all stood up and called 911, and I was the closest to the address to call 911, and it was 6 rings. And I went, oh boy, I had to look at my phone and go, is this 911 I'm calling?
Yeah.
I didn't even know. And you know, I don't know. I mean, it's just one anecdotal-ish incident, but I know that we need more people there. You know, it's going to be tough. I guess my one question is, are we getting to a point where it's compromising, you know, response and safety?
My mantra, human being first, I'm compromising the human being at the job
yeah.
by way of their work-life balance.
Yeah.
And how they're able to manage one of the toughest jobs on the planet.
Sure. And I see that. I feel that I've been, in my mind, that's been front and foremost for the officers and the fire, but you're 24 hours too, and I think that's part of the stress. So that's where we're seeing it. Okay.
Especially the level of supervision. The supervisors on the bridge, they're really 911 call takers before they're supervisors at this point.
So that you don't have that better structural
Correct.
organization. Okay. Well, thank you. And, you know, it's good to have someone with a new set of eyes in our organization too.
Thank you.
Nothing. Councilman Delgado, nothing?
Nope, I believe it. Councilwoman Breckus
All right.
said everything else.
Vice Mayor Jordan.
Thank you very much. How long have you been with dispatch?
With this dispatch?
Yeah.
Since September, but with the career, 37 years, starting when I was 4.
Where were you before?
Starting with Los Angeles Police Department, San Francisco, San Jose, local, state, and federal government, and private industry, managing large public safety projects. My last project was New York City.
Wow. But
Little
you like
different.
it here the best, right?
I like it here. I want to wrap up my career
I'm gonna
out
tell-
west.
I'm
I
gonna
like the
tell Mayor
west.
de Blasio
I'm
you said
here.
that.
I'm wrapping up my career out west. Yes.
Good for you. Moral of the
Good for
story
you.
is
Good
you
for
know
you.
what you're doing and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
You know, you are the kind of the unsung heroes that you know, when there's emergencies, you don't get a lot of the praise and the accolades. So you know, we are going to try to do level best to get you. I know turnover is incredibly expensive, not just fiscally, but on a human, and I know you're suffering through that. And I know we're all suffering up here with a horrible budget situation that we've inherited in part and are struggling to, you know, have a fix, which I hope our legislators will help us with that. But I appreciate all the stuff that you do and recognize the tough job that you do.
Sure. We'd love to see your shiny faces in that recognition anytime. Not now, it's flu season. We're incubating,
Yeah,
but
right.
in about a month.
That's
And-
good feedback. That's good feedback.
Really, they like to consider themselves the first responder, frankly, in this industry. And also regarding the budget, I've seen some creative things along the way since I was 4, and I would enjoy the opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues to put our heads together on doing more with less.
I think that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councilwoman
Thank you.
Dewar.
I just want to thank you for such a great job, great presentation, and kudos to what you do. And I think to our Madam Manager, I think this is exactly what I had hoped by getting the staff come and present their own budgets, that we would get to know the staff and hear in their own voice and their own perspective what is going on in their world. And I think right here is where I'm seeing the value of having these meetings. So again, I'm going to thank you. But this is what, we do get to talk with the chief from time to time. I have never had a chance to talk to you or your predecessor before, or heard about from your own perspective, your office and what you're doing, your activities. So I thank you for that. It really, really helps me have a better depth of understanding of our city. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're authorized 55 personnel. How many have we got? How many openings we got?
We're down to 2 openings, with 1 finishing up their background and 2 in the background process beyond that. So we'll be at authorized staff in the next week or 2, but then we have internal promotions, so it's a cycle. But forecasting and having a good active list right behind it is where we are. We're on top of it. Our number 1 priority is and always will be from now on staffing.
Okay. So if I remember right, we've got 10 stations up there for dispatchers in the center.
More than that, actually. 5 radio positions, and 10 would include a supervisor position, but it's likely 10 plus a supervisor would be 11. Minimum staffing ranges, though, on time of day and day of the week.
Okay, that's how many people, but how many stations do we have? If we filled every station we have available up there, how many personnel would we have per shift?
It would probably be 12 to 14, depending on the day and the hour.
Okay, so when we're starting looking at getting to the staffing we need up there, we're gonna have to look at enlarging our dispatch center as well.
We're already doing that concurrent with our request to you in the budget, but also looking at our design and layout of the floor and the environmental impact that we have now on the busy hour, as well as where our space starts and ends with growth.
So I just want to remind this council that this dispatch center handled 360,000 calls last year. That is 2 calls every 3 minutes.
Actually, the count in the city manager's office through Scott Gillis, we worked on the numbers and we came to a full, the last calendar year, we're at 505,000 calls.
Chief, you need to work on your deputy chief when he gives me numbers. So that's almost a call a minute.
Busy hour is about 125 calls per hour.
Right. So, I mean, again, we've got certain areas that if we're going to maintain the public safety of this community, we have to prioritize finding ways to make that happen. And I know that there was a time that your center with staffing levels, each shift was working at least 1 person on overtime. And given the stress of that job, that's not a healthy place for those women to be, those people to be. It's that is probably the most stressful job. Not only in, I think I'd rather disarm bombs than be a dispatcher.
Rubber wallpaper helps. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions from council? No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time
it.
and the body of work that you do in support of what we do. We really appreciate it too. So thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess I will not close the meeting, obviously, correct?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, what's next steps?
So we'll adjourn it, but next steps, we're gonna have more presentations.
When?
I'm gonna leave that up to our city manager.
For the record, Saber Newbie, I think we'll work with each of you in your calendars to see whether or not we should do another special meeting to go through the rest of the departments. We really only got through 1 today because of the delay. Or if we'll tack it on to another, one of your regular council meetings. We'll just need to see what the workload is on the regular council meeting. If you guys have a preference right now, you can certainly let us know.
I think we do well on Friday afternoon meetings,
I do too.
because we do that during the legislative session.
I have conflicts every other Friday, so let's talk
Half
about
of 'em.
that.
Yeah.
One I could do off and on, off and on. Go
my-
ahead.
I'm not going to put words in staff's mouth, but I think anytime we say Friday afternoon, I don't know that.
Morale drops.
They're all smiling because they know it's true.
They'd rather
So
do
let's
Friday
not do that.
morning.
Then let's look at Thursdays.
Yeah, something.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think,
I understand.
you know, when they take a vacation day or they need to book appointments, I think a lot of them try to do it. Again, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I just know from years of, Friday afternoons are tough, I think, from a staff standpoint.
Okay.
So I
Sounds
think
good. We won't do Fridays.
next
ahead.
Thursday is the day after council meeting. It's still, you could post it on Monday and we could have the meeting on Thursday and.
My
take-
schedule's totally booked.
Oh,
on
for Thursday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So,
Mine's really
Yeah,
tricky.
next week doesn't work.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
next
think
week
the
won't work.
following week, and, to blow through the departments, we could do that in 3 hours, 2.5
Yeah.
hours.
yeah, we're spending a lot of time on police and fire. They take up, what, 70% of our
Yeah.
budget?
Yeah,
So
and
it's
the other
important.
thing I'm gonna say, you guys, I understand you wanna ask questions, and I'm all for that, but also get with individual departments too, because I think it can cut down on some of that time that we spend up here.
Okay.
And that can help facilitate
Definitely.
the information and what you need to get. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend.
No, Madam Mayor.
Oh, what do you,
Sorry.
oh, public comment, sorry.
Thank you. Tom Dunn would like to speak in general
Go right
public
ahead.
comment.
You sat here and then I'm like, okay, we gotta go.
Well, if you have a hosted bar in here, you might get a lot more participation too.
That's a
Not
good
that I'm
idea.
suggesting that,
That's
but
a good idea. You wanna bring it next time? We're gonna make you sponsor it.
I don't know. I think I'd be probably violating about 40 different city policies if I did that. For the record, once again, Tom Dunn, representing the men and women of the Reno Firefighters Association. My comments are in relation to the budget workshop and everything, and going back to some of the primary goals of the Reno Fire Department for the next year. One of them is increased staffing. For full recognition, we still have 2 stations that don't have, without engines in them. They're still temporarily, I shouldn't say temporary, they're partially staffed with 2-person medical rescue units. But we also have 2 ladder companies that are still browned out, not staffed. And we really can't open up those companies in the future until we have replacement apparatus for them as well. The current plan, as it's currently proposed, does not address the need for future stations and staffing based on plan development and growth within the city limits. These projects include Verdi and Meridian 120, the Park Lane project, Stonegate, and the new Daybreak project. All those projects are going to have a huge impact on service delivery for all of the city departments, not just fire. And get into some of that other stuff later. I think it's important to recognize, specific to the fire department, that as of this year, the Reno Fire Department will have over 50 employees that will have 20 years or more of service and are eligible to retire at any time. And this does not include work-related injuries that may lead to retirement or retirement due to other issues, such as medical issues outside the fire service. Hiring may not keep up with the number of employees that will be leaving the organization just based on those current needs. Fire doubles in size every minute. And as apparatus become older, they become busier, and they respond from further distances away just based on our current call volume. There's going to be an impact on response times as this community continues to grow and is going to be challenged to provide services under the existing and tax revenue structure. I think we've all recognized what's happened in the last 10 years. And at some point, there's going to have to be a come to Jesus meeting with the state on how we address these issues moving forward. Just real quick, moving on in civil service, it's important to fill the civil service examiner position sooner than later, just based on the existing workload. You have a 3-legged stool that only has 2 people currently staffing that department outside of additional help from the other departments. And it's imperative for the efficient recruitment and promotion of your employees to fill that position sooner than later. It is also important that the vacancies on the Civil Service Commission be filled soon and be reflective of the community as we grow as we appoint new members. We want to make sure that that Civil Service Commission is reflective of the current employees that we have, as well as the future employees that we want to hire. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, Madam Clerk.
We have no further public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to send it Councilmember McKenzie. Moved ahead to the bar? Okay, there you go. Good suggestion. All right, so I have a motion. All those in favor? All right.